All right, hello everybody. This is Training Without Conflict podcast 24. And today I have the pleasure to talk to one of my very good friends in the dog world, Aimee Sadler, Dogs Play for Life. We talk so often of that finally decided that we should make a podcast together. There is a lot to talk about. A lot of stuff has happened in the past and some new things going on. So for those that don't know Aimee, and I'll let you also add and fill in the gaps that I'm going to miss, but Aimee is the founder and CEO of Dogs Playing for Life. It's an enrichment program for shelter dogs that focuses a lot on playgroups and play, which is also something that I have a great passion to. Nationally recognized trainer specializing in behavior problems. A lot of we'll dive into this, but talking about difficult cases, go see the dogs Aimee has. That's really the easiest way to put it. Anybody can say we have a difficult dog. I suggest go and visit Dogs Play for Life and see the dogs that nobody else wants, giving them a second chance. It's something special. Aimee's had a bunch of awards, the Henry Berg Leadership Award 2011, Maddie's Front Hero Award, Members Hall of Fame, International Association of Canine Professionals, did a television series, Shelter Me, New Beginnings, that was aired on public television and Netflix, recipient of the Petco Foundation Love in Action Award, and of course, there it is, and of course, 2017, Dogs Play for Life opened the first National Canine Center in Florida. And I think, yeah, I'll let you. I'm sure there is a little bit more to say.
The first thing that I want to say is that I'm very, very proud of my trophy. But then it's so funny when you look at your wall and the back of you, and I think that it is quite an honor to be on a podcast with you because the company that I have the privilege of keeping with your guests is whoa, and the level of mastery and training and everything. And so anyway, I'm very proud of my one little trophy, but doesn't hold a candle.
It's a very, very important one. This is what really is about, helping dogs in need, like dogs truly in need. And yeah, how did we ever really connect it? I don't know exactly the story. I don't remember things, but I know Connie, right?
Yeah, Connie's the one that got us in touch with one another. She also had something to do with us having this beautiful facility that was donated to us in 2017, the Canine Center Florida, and that's up in Lake City. And she just felt like, of course, I'd been following you for a long time. I knew of you. You just didn't know about me. But it was thanks to Connie that she introduced us. And you've been so generous with helping us with some of these problem children that we have. And we're very grateful for that.
So would you say it was almost right about the time that you guys opened up the facility then?
It was within the first year, I'm pretty sure. Sure. Yeah. Because didn't we have most of, because remember, you both came and we had most of the Ontario dogs. Yeah, so it was very early on.
Yeah, that was the Ontario dogs. I remember now. We did a workshop, and yeah, that's kind of how it started. Then we had a few of your people from the team came to and went through the school. Yeah, but that's what it was exactly. And then you got me hooked with all the interesting cases that you have. That it's like you just can't leave it alone. It's like,
And by the way, also J-Jack, remember? He had come down to work with us, and there was his favorite dog that we had from the Ontario crew, Jack. he called you about Jack originally. I don't think you may have met Jack at one point, but you two were kiboshing about him over the phone. And speaking of shelter dogs, I just recently saw your video about Tina, and what a lovely thing to see a dog just doing absolutely nothing and being content. So thank you for working with her. What a beautiful thing.
Tina, I don't know what I'm gonna do with her. She is completely in love with me, and I think it's mutual. So I don't know. We'll see. She's
that's what happens. That's what happens
right.
when you work with these dogs that need so much help, is that but that's actually an interesting point for, and you and I have spoken about it a couple of times when you've come down with regard to our program, that we are working really hard to progress the dogs without relying upon our relationship, right? Because they're not going to be staying with us and we have to pass them off. And that's really the biggest thing that I learned when I started training dogs in shelters. It's like, why is the stuff that I, normally was doing as a professional trainer that was working so well, why is it falling apart when I try to teach the same things in this context? So, but that was one of them, figuring out that we're building relationship all the time, but we're trying not to rely upon the relationship to be the reason the dog is progressing.
Yeah, and the attachment. The attachment is on a different level with a dog that has problems, right? Because all of a sudden, you're the only person, so to speak, that the dog accepts, and now you're so special, and now you understand the dog, and then there is that. It's a difficult situation. It happens so often, and especially I'm sure for the trainers, not the new trainers that come to your place, I'm sure that there is moments when it's very hard on them.
Oh yeah, definitely. When the canine center opened, I was hoping that we'd be able to have a 50% positive outcome. I mean, we're down to 83%, but I just never anticipated that, because these are the dogs that are all euthanasia candidates. And like you said, pretty much within the sheltering world, the worst of the worst. So yeah, the team gets really bonded with them. They go into the dorm rooms with them. But it's interesting, one of the pieces of advice that you had given me with one of the cases you were helping us with was let the dog really bond to one person. And J-Jack gave us that advice too. And I've always thought about that. And the team begs for me to have project dogs. And I've held really firm. Not that I don't, I follow most of your advice, but on that one, I just think the bond that then, the emotional damage that might be done to the dog if they're so bonded to one of us. And then it's no different than when we get so mad in sheltering when owners surrender their dogs. And right. I think that we're not understanding that if we bond with them like that, and then we turn them, give them up and give them to someone else, the dog's experience is the same. Exactly. They're losing that primary bond. So we obviously are building strong relationships with these dogs. And sometimes you can't help it. The dogs just really gravitate to some of the individual handlers. There's a real problem that I'm having as I get older, is that dogs are they're quick to hyperbond with me, and they want to be very protective of me, is what I've learned lately, which has changed a little bit, and it's more as I've gotten older. And so it's really trying to not set the dogs up for failure and setting them up for success, so that we're trying to teach them, this is our little catchphrase, essential skills for a life fulfilled. Nice. And so we talk about wanting to be like the best camp counselors. They get to come and have a great time with us, learn these new skills, but then they go home to their family, and then they fall in love someplace else. Of course, they fall in love with us and we fall in love with them too, but we're trying so hard to not create that bond that could be traumatic for them again if they lose us.
How is it now? Like, how busy are you guys there?
Oh, we're always full. We have a long wait list. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's always going to be full. There's always going to be a need. And I think in sheltering, and I'm not sure how much you know about the sheltering world on the whole, but right now we're, post-pandemic, I have to say that I've been proven wrong, because I expected that there were going to be a bunch of returns of dogs that were with people going back to work, and dogs that would have separation anxiety, and that were just not coping with such a dramatic change in their lives. That we have not seen that to be the case. And there hasn't been an influx of intake. But what has happened, and the shelters across the country are in crisis. They're overfull, they're overflowing, and many shelters that had been past euthanizing for space, Some of them are reverting back to they're overcrowded and they're needing to euthanize animals that they don't have a medical or behavioral reason, and they're just euthanizing for space because the outcomes are stagnant. Nobody's coming to get dogs from the shelters right now. I think that the only thing I heard this, and I don't know if this is true yet, I don't know if this has been really fleshed out, but that there's a possibility that during the pandemic, when everybody was learning how to order everything in their life online, that also included pets, right? Because what we know, the last time I heard, I'm not the best with retaining exact numbers, but the gist of it was we should be able to get all these dogs in need, even some of these problem children, right, into homes, because I think there's something like 17 million homes a year will acquire a pet. 17 million. And we're euthanizing less than 3 million pets out of our shelters a year. So why are we having the problem? But it's where people are acquiring the pets. So I think people started ordering, even not, for people that are looking for a purebred dog specifically, even though there's purebred dogs in the shelters, you could speak to that point much better than I ever could. But I'm talking about people even buying just mutts. And I think they were doing it online and from backyard breeders or whatever it was. And people are breeding all kinds of mixy dogs. And so it's a conundrum. Can't quite figure it out.
I haven't checked that on your website, but do you have all the dogs listed?
No, because interestingly, Ivan, we're not an adoption center. We are a board and train facility.
Right.
We don't own the dogs when they come. So it's the reason that I never set it up to be that we were actually placing our own dogs directly was because I knew that my save rate or my live release rate over time was going to get worse and worse and worse because the dogs would get more difficult. And I couldn't be measured if I'm a nonprofit and I'm looking for funding. I can't be measured if they're going to compare me to other shelters that way. So so the dogs are owned by the originating shelter while they're in our care and in training. When they're ready to be placed, they move on to a placement partner. Few dogs go back to the originating shelter, but as we're doing this, fewer and fewer of the originating shelters will be able to maintain the dogs in their normal adoption centers with the level of training that we've put on them. We don't think that the dog will thrive in their care, so most of them go on to our placement partners, like Jacksonville Humane Society is one of our strongest. Peggy Adams is another Florida shelter that is a placement partner for us. And so they then will take a dog that's finished in training, and typically they'll trade, right? So they'll take two of our dogs to send one new problem dog, right? And so we'll trade, and then they do the placements for us. So the originating shelter just transfers ownership to the placement partner shelter.
You have a place in California also, right?
Well, we are contracted right now. We've received some grants to be embedded at the Los Angeles Animal Services.
Los Angeles, right.
So we're working with them. And Cody, you've met Cody, my oldest son. Yes. He's now, because we have a lot of activity in Los Angeles, he's now the director of Los Angeles programming. He wanted to also relocate. Okay. And so he's managing 2 other team members that are there. He bounces around because he's not designated. His position's not only designated for LA Animal Services, so he's also been over to the Los Angeles, the county, the Department of Animal Care and Control, and their care. So hopefully we're going to be embedded in all of those shelters to really drive our model forward and to demonstrate. There's been other models that they've been working on in LA.
Paying attention. I've been paying attention.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that we are definitely embedding at Los Angeles Animal Services. That's been approved in their budget, so that'll move forward starting in January. So we'll end up with DPFL teams on the ground at all 6 of their care centers, but there's another 7 care centers over at the county system. And so you're talking, I think it's 130,000 dogs a year that we'll be hopefully working with, and then obviously be able to demonstrate with stats. I am not an academic at all, but I like to have at least measurement to the work that we do because, I don't want things to just be my opinion. I'm a very opinionated person, but, we've got to be able to back up what we're doing, especially with all the, crankiness that goes on about what we do.
Yes. So since we are on that topic, how is Dogs Play for Life different than anything else out there?
So the core enrichment programming, separate from the Canine Center, we have teams that are traveling around going into shelters and teaching them how to implement playgroups as like a foundation for what we call is the Every Dog Every Day program. And that means that not every dog has to go to playgroups every day, but we want to ensure that, dogs in U.S. shelters are getting quality time out of their enclosures every day. And when you're talking about, like I just said, at those two systems, at the South LA shelter where our team is mainly housed, they're supposed to have about just under 300 dogs. They're up to 440 dogs at that one facility. So how do you get 440 dogs? And some of them can't, they're being medically treated, or they legally, they're a court case dog, they can't come out. But think about all those other dogs that can, right? How do you attend to them? So if you're talking about what's unique about us is that we can serve high volumes of dogs because we focus on our playgroup model, which really allows the dogs to get out and play. We're not micromanaging them. We assume that dogs want to be social with each other, and that's actually that's how we go into it. We're just here as hall monitors for you guys. Let's just let you get together. Now, when we show up at high volume shelters where the dogs haven't been enriched, obviously things are tense when we get started, and so it can be challenging to get going. But then once you get in the rhythm of getting the dogs out, letting them play, it is amazing how it smooths out and how much easier it becomes. And it's interesting that people say, well, we don't have the staff to do playgroups. When you're understaffed, that is even more the reason that you should be doing playgroups, because it's the most efficient way for you to attend to those dogs and let them get their yayas out and to be enriched adequately.
Right. Very true. Like that there is always, we'll talk about the latest canine symposium, but there's always presentations and always talking about shelter environment and always trying to think and brainstorm how to improve. Almost always seems to be the conversation around enrichment, but enrichment like what can we put in their kennel, what toy or what, but an actual interaction, dog to dog or human to dog interaction, very little has been always talked about in those presentation and symposiums and conferences. And I think that's one thing that really got my attention. Obviously when I heard that you're taking all the dogs that everybody has given up on, tried everything, being force-free, being whatever, and before the dog gets euthanized, they contact Aimee. Aimee, what do you have room? And Aimee takes the dog. And that's pretty much how I found out about you. I was like, wow, I need to see this place, and I need to see what you guys do. Now, the other big difference between you and the majority of shelters is that you're not shy to use form of aversive. You're not shy to use electric color if it's needed, if you feel that it's gonna benefit. We always have cost and benefit, and ultimately there is no ideology that prevents you from helping your dogs that come, because pretty much the ideology already gave up on those dogs.
I have such tremendous respect for all the training that you do and a lot of the people that you've had, the trainers that are on your show. But the sport that you all train for, I didn't have any personal interest in that, not even competitive obedience. But I started learning a long time ago from as many very accomplished trainers as I possibly could learn from, because I didn't want a dog to fall through the cracks in my care. So I just wanted to try to become sophisticated in my understanding of training, even though I wasn't ever going to go out to train to that level. And that's where I was exposed to, so many different styles and techniques of working with dogs and dealing with problems. I'll never forget, it was one of Bart's seminars a long time ago. And I brought this was my heart dog right here, Cooley. And I brought him because I wanted to learn, again, whatever the latest and greatest was around remote collars, because he was an amazing dog, but I didn't have a recall under all circumstances. And I had done all the preparatory training, but I knew if he flushed a deer at the wrong time, that I could get the two of us into trouble and everything. So I wanted to learn about remote collar and polishing and finishing some behaviors. And I wanted to learn, some refined work. And so anyway, all of that got started because, again, I wanted I want the dogs to I'm into like freedom and independence and everything. So I am not shy about whatever it's going to take to allow you more opportunity is what I'm always looking for. And so it just never, Well, I can share one really funny story with you. I went up to see a Ted Turner seminar. This is when I had first started in sheltering. Not Ted Turner, the TV Ted Turner, but the marine mammal Ted Turner. And I came away from his seminar and seeing just incredible work. He was working with I think a commissary dolphin, and there was medical issues, and they were having to all get in the pool and corral, and it's a very kind of stressy species of dolphin.
Yeah.
And they were having to corral him, and they thought, well, the dolphin's going to have a heart attack with us trying to actually treat him. And he asked the veterinarians to give him something like 2 weeks. And so in 2 weeks' time, he trained the dolphin to come to station, open his mouth, and be intubated. What's the word? Intubated, not with being coerced, but voluntarily.
Voluntarily, correct.
And taking the treatments and everything. And that was ultimately to save the dolphin's life. So I watched something amazing like that. And I thought, I came back to my shelter. I was at the Southampton Animal Shelter at that time. And I felt so ashamed that I had moved too far away from my roots, because I'd been a marine mammal. I had been an apprentice for a marine mammal trainer in California.
Oh, really?
When I was young. Yeah, when I was 19. So I quit my office job and worked at Marie Callender's outside of Magic Mountain in California, and apprenticed for the Dolphin and Sea Lion show. You can't see. Oh, wow. This is Kaina, the big.
I just had a podcast with one of those trainers, like just my last podcast, and we talked about volunteer, drawing blood, and it was actually a sea lion that they pull a tooth out with, giving the shot. Numbing the jaw, giving another shot, and finally pulling the tooth, just with that process. So anyway, that's interesting.
So when I went to that seminar and I saw him, I felt like ashamed that I'd almost become lazy, that I wasn't staying so pure to everything that I had learned about basically, mental manipulation training, not without the physicality behind it, right? And so it took me about 3 days of being back in the shelter. And I thought, well, I know exactly why I've moved away from that, because it does not pertain or work in this situation, in this context, and these animals and these adverse conditions. And, my thing about, and I don't want to sound like I'm going to be like against force-free. I love everything that force-free trainers do, or that positive-only trainers do. We do all of that too. We consider ourselves pretty masterful in all of that. It's just, for it to work, this is what's so crazy to me. For it to work, you have to control the environment and access to resources. Period. You have to have control of that. And ultimately, we do that so that we can mentally manipulate another creature or living being to do things that we want them to do by controlling their environment and their access to resources. Why do we think that that's so humane? It's just a human construct. Right? So it's, if you think about it, it's pretty twisted. Right? Yes. And then especially when we have all these conversations coming up around consent and all this kind of other stuff. And I'm like, wow, human beings have this miraculous ability to create a story in our heads that, boy, do we want to believe. But I do really. So 3 days back in the shelter after watching Ted Turner doing amazing training that I think, there's nothing wrong with that. It was amazing. But I thought that if I try to apply that to this shelter dog here right now today, it's going to take me so much more time, and this environment is deteriorating this dog faster than I can help this dog. And not only this dog, I've got 30 others that I have to help. So it was trying to put it together in my, can I be logical? What can I do that is going to be least invasive, minimally aversive, right? That was always intuitively what I would do. What can we do in the true spirit of what that is supposed to be? I just always felt like, no, I've got everything in the kitchen sink. I'm going to use anything possible, any tool, any technique to support this animal to rewardable behavior so that they do not have to live here and they get to go home with someone. Exactly.
That's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. And to add to what you're saying, any of those marine animal centers, okay, they may convince the sea lion to leave his flipper to take blood. But in the very next minute, maybe they have to move him from one place to another, and most likely they use some aversive to convince him and coax him to get there because he doesn't want to all of a sudden. But nobody talks about that part.
Right. No, and I think that, well, and just it's a caged animal. We're working with animals and we've taken away all their freedom.
Just as you said, you control the environment and everything that the animal wants, so you can manipulate it in a very intelligent way. But that's not when that's not possible, what is the solution? And if there is a better solution, then teach us, right? Show us. With the, like, I don't know, like the whole aversive and negative reinforcement, and like if we don't have negative reinforcement in life, all life will cease to exist, basically. I mean, we will all be gone, I mean, I should repeat it, like without negative reinforcement, all life cease to exist, period. Same thing, if you put a leash on a dog, soon or later, somewhere, you're using it as an aversive.
Well, you already blew it, right? It's so funny to me, like, not you already blew it, but you can't attach a leash to a dog and influence their behavior in any way, shape, or form and consider yourself a force-free trainer. Right. If it influences their behavior. Now, if it doesn't, then they never feel the end of the leash or whatever. It just seems so silly. It seems so silly to me that we're even concerned about that. And, when I'm doing presentations now, I think I do one on Thursday. It's called For Dog's Sake, will you please stop doing that? And it's basically all the handling things that people do so terribly wrong that just sets the dogs up for failure. And I do talk about that whole concept of consent, and that they didn't consent to the leash and the collar in the first place. They don't consent to the medical treatment we put them through. They don't consent to being in the shelter in the first place. And we do all of that to them because we have the sense that it's in their best interest ultimately, right? We make decisions. We decide when we're feeding our dogs, right? Yes. Most of us.
And consent is such an abstract. Even talking about it, it's kind of weird because I can trick a dog to consent to pretty much anything a dog can do that does not want to do it. But they will eagerly consent because of manipulation. So why are we, I don't know why are we going that path. And it's different, like the conversation I'm having with you is very different than the conversation I would have with some sport trainers, because a dog's life is on the line here. And if a force-free advocates say we would rather euthanize the dog than help the dog, or at least make an attempt to help the dog, this is to me, that's very unethical. That's way more unethical than any attempt to try to save dog's life.
It's been shared with me that there are some academics that have said that specifically too, that they would euthanize a dog before they would let dogs playing for life get their hands on them. 100%. In the context of letting them be in play groups, training them, whatever it might be. And I find that, listen, I have absolutely no problem at all. Like, the joke about us, the only thing two trainers are going to agree upon is what the third one's doing wrong, right? Like, so it's always fine to me that people will, and I thought, I've got to say it on this. Remember when you first came and you said to us, your obedience is shit.
Oh my God.
And you said that, I'm like, I know, but you have to, from your perspective, I know it is, and we're going to work hard to get better. And then now you always tell me to stop saying that, but it actually was, I thought it was so funny. It's one of my favorite things to tell people that Ivan says our obedience is shit, because it is in comparison to what you do, for sure. But the whole point is the context.
It's a very different. Come on, this is a joke, everybody. Like what they do, it's really, really special.
Well, thank you. But it is true compared to what the obedience that all of you master competition trainers do. Sure. But the whole point of it is that I think that this is what really, for us, most of the time, our main job is not to teach dogs to do things. our priority is to get them to stop doing things that is really valuable to them to do.
Yeah.
Really valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is what our program is about. Other than playgroups and everything, and enrichment and the training and the shelter, that's really about how can we keep you mentally and physically satiated. Because here's the thing, if we just physically satiate the dogs and let them, run and get their yayas out, but there isn't that mental stimulation, that component that goes with it, we're just conditioning them to need more and more. They're just going to need more and more if we're just doing the physical conditioning, right? We have to provide some kind of mental stimulation when they're outside of the kennel to combat all the frustration and repetitiveness. And, barking dogs in a kennel, it's like us having to live in a house with a fire alarm going off all the time, right? So we have to do something for them. So the playgroups and everything and allowing them to interact is basically have that intensive social interaction so that you have to conflict resolution skills. You've got to put all that kind of stuff together. You've got things to think about. Sometimes the dogs will be stressed in the initial process but it's the kind of stress that will lead to adaptation that is going to strengthen them and create resiliency, which is what our job is. And then at the canine center, when we're talking about dogs that are coming to us because they've got stranger danger or whatever, we teach them things to do so that we can redirect them to rewardable behaviors, of course. But ultimately, our job is to make them stop doing whatever it is that landed them with us in the first place. Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. So that's why it's just mind-boggling to me that, and we have to stop them from doing it not just with us. And, most of the time we never even meet the adopter. Dog leaves us, goes into another facility to be handled by complete strangers that don't handle like we do, and then will be adopted. And they have to be successful through all of that.
Yeah, exactly. This is it is a very difficult situation, and there is always the conversation around studies, right? Mm. And there is not one, like I've been thinking lately about this, there is no one study. Like we should focus on a study where we measure quality of life after that moment of discomfort. Like what happened? Where is that dog today? Mm-hmm. Like none of the research focuses on that part. Everybody's like, oh, you tapped the dog with the shock collar and he yelped. Therefore, da-da-da-da-da-da. It's like, okay, how about we measure quality of life after the moment of that discomfort? Mm-hmm. What happened next? Why do we not pay attention? But somehow, hypothetically, the whole, the force-free, it's always that the love to talk about the worst case scenario, as it has happened over and over and over again, and making assumption that the future is going to be like predicting the worst hurricane that's coming to Florida that will never come. That's what we are based on. Nobody on their side tries to acknowledge the fact, and I'm going to talk to you about Tina a little bit later, because she's a very good example of that, but you have plenty of dogs like I mean, not plenty, pretty much any dog that you have, it's a difficult dog that clearly failed positive reinforcement approach.
And sometimes, in fairness, Ivan, sometimes dogs are sent to us because the training that was installed was not force-free or positive only. It was the opposite. We have plenty
just
of dogs.
Wrong training.
We have plenty of dogs that have come in, and one of the core things that we have to resolve for them first is that a leash has been weaponized for them. And they have, not only are they wary of being handled, but a lot of them would turn and go after you if you tried to pick up a leash.
Right.
Right. What does that indicate to you?
Right.
So
and that's the other thing. That's another good case of how the force-free ideology would think. It's like, well, they will give those examples, but these are the examples, the worst case scenario and non-contingent. And all the dogs typically need is for some clarity, for things to start to make sense so they can take a breather and fit in the environment, right?
Well, I love Dr. Protopopova. I think she's done some really nice work. And when at the Canine Science Symposium that I attended a couple weeks ago, she brought something up in her talk. I don't know if this was something that you were going to talk about, because I know you attended it remotely, right? But when she said,
they did not have it. I mean, I attend everything that anything that's of interest. So I listen to all the presentations, but her presentation, there was few interesting presentations. She was one of them, and they were in the afternoon, and the webinar did not include those, which was like very weird. So yeah, that was at least as a title, it was something of interest. And then of course you messaged me and you're like, wow, are you paying attention? I'm like, no, I'm out of it.
Well, I have to say I really applaud her, and I thanked her at the end, because she brought up to all of us, she asked all of us in the audience, would you prefer safety or independence? And she wanted us to all just think about that. And I thought it was brilliant, because basically what she was getting to is that we all have we're looking at the world through our lens, right? So I am a person that would, if I choose, I want independence. Right? That's what's so primarily important to me. So of course I've built programming that comes from that core foundational need that I have as a human being. Yeah. And I imagine that for people that need safety, that is what they need to thrive more than anything. If that's the priority for them, I understand why people will then develop programming and go in a direction that is going to ensure that. And so it made so much sense to me, because I am not, what I don't want to be, I don't want to be at war with a force-free community. Right. And I would be we are so open and welcoming and just that, open and welcoming. But what's so hard is that that's just not returned, that respect or that. And then when I think about that, is that the people that are really disturbed by our programming because we're not force-free, I realize that they truly, truly believe that what we're doing is not in the best interest of animals, and that means so much to them. So I feel like, all right, I get why you want to question what we're doing, and like we all want the same thing. But I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe, when one of the presentations was talking about really trying to prioritize the value of a human interaction, right? And I might be oversensitive about it. I don't know if her intention was to say less playgroups and more people time. I don't know if it was that exactly. But what I would say, yes, of course, people time is so important. But if there's going to be like an academic push in sheltering to give the dogs more one-on-one time with people, that's more important. Sure, I wouldn't even argue that point, but tell me who's going to get there to give it to them. Right? So, and if you don't have enough people to provide them with that adequate out of kennel one-on-one human time, then you have to give them something else. And I would 100% stand down and say, if you have enough people to get these dogs out and have one-on-one time, and then you don't need to do playgroups here. I still think, actually, to be honest with you, I still think letting dogs be dogs and playing together is something that is so important to so many of them. I still think you're denying them an opportunity, right? But yes. I would be willing to let it go. I would fight for playgroups if they were being attended to. And there's been shelters that I'm like, no, you don't. There's another playgroup program. We're not the only one, but we have a polar opposite approach. And there's been times where we've had shelters that have called us for a training. And when we've heard their kind of statistics and where they are, that they're much more risk averse, whatever, we'll refer them to that other group. We just know that the other training would never be able to assist the shelters that we assist because we can help volumes of dogs because of the way our program is designed.
Yeah, and it's not it's really not that complicated to be able to establish certain rules in the group of dogs, just like you establish certain rules in a group of people.
We're really only there. We talk about establishing steering and brakes. A very good friend, I've asked you before if you know Walid, and I think you knew him from a long time ago. He's one of the first people that I was learning from, Walid Milouf. And he talks about this analogy of training dogs is like driving a car, that you need steering, brakes, and gas. And it's the combination. It all changes depending upon where you want to go, the kind of car, blah, blah, blah. So I've always loved that analogy, and I give him credit for it all the time. I'm always a give credit where credit is due person. So so when we talk about establishing steering and brakes in the playgroups, that's because the only thing that we feel that our role, we are not there to the activity, letting the dogs be dogs and us getting out of their way, is the positive reinforcement. That is the enrichment. Our job is only just to be the hall monitor and to say, you need to slow down with that, you need to go to something else, or you need to stop that. And if the dogs can tell each other that, that's ideal.
Right.
You know, if we don't have to interact or engage with the dogs in the playgroup and they just manage all of it themselves, I mean, those are the best playgroups. Yeah, the best.
Yeah, I always keep saying that dogs interact through use of aversives. They use negative reinforcement and punishment with each other all day long, and they love it, and they understand how to do it because that's their language. They cannot say, well, if you bite me too hard, I'm not gonna play, or I'm not gonna give you whatever. Like, this is a human concepts. This is abstract for a dog.
Yeah.
Dog is like, I'm gonna try to bite you, and the other one is, I'm gonna try to not let you. And here the game begins. And as a supervisor, you're responsible to set some limits and consequences, just as you know, there is a hockey game and they get into their little fight and somebody goes on the bench for 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. That's just normal, but it's not normal in the narrative of the force free. That's not normal, and they're going out of their way, including the cherry picking of all scientific research. Mm-hmm. Like, they literally will pick 2 sentences and not say the third one because it is to them controversial, or it gives ammunition, it gives a reason why aversive would make sense.
Well, that doesn't sound very scientific, but I'm no academic.
No,
right?
It doesn't, and that's, I mean, like when I listened to, going back to that canine symposium that just happened, I mean, it was, like a few weeks ago, right? Mm-hmm. And I was so ready to listen to Erika Feuerbacher. Let's talk about prong and shock collars, a review of what we know something right. And throughout the whole presentation, I wish I actually emailed her, and I have not received response yet, and hopefully maybe she hasn't checked emails. But that's the disconnect we have with them. Like, I believe that we want to have a discussion and talk, and I don't think they want that. I think they feel very comfortable of going to a symposium, making a presentation, giving their side, and never have anybody challenge that.
Well, I have to tell you, when I was there, and I had listened to, I think you'd shared a link with me, and I'd listened to her do an interview prior to, but you know, and she's very passionate, and she loves animals, and she's doing great work when she's helping dogs in shelters. And I am grateful and thankful that anybody that's out there that participating in my world, trying to make shelter dogs' lives better, I'm all for it. I think what I was offended about, frankly, is that there were claims that any of us that are balanced or whatever, that we don't want the exposure, and so we won't allow for research. And I kept my composure, but the only thing that bothers me about that is that's so very not true. I have invited anybody to come study us, because one of the excuses for not having more relevant and new research is that it won't make it past an ethics committee. But here's the thing. I have a training facility with 18 kennels on one side, 18 kennels on the other side. I'd be happy to say, we have this many people and we will work the dogs on this side. You can have the same number of people and work the dogs on this side. You've got 1 month, go.
Yeah.
Or just come watch what we're doing and come code the shit out of everything that we're doing. I've invited so much opportunities for research, but nobody will come.
Very true.
My whole thing is we're doing it anyway. It's not like you're asking us to do something to dogs. This is what we're doing with the dogs.
I've thought about this, and I did a little research earlier in the year, and I think we're going to do another one project, and it's very interesting because it's truly a collaboration, and it's not about competition. I don't like that format that you just mentioned, like, okay, you come, you take this side of the kennel, and we do this side, and we see who's more successful. I don't think we need to do that. I think we need to find what works sometimes when something else doesn't work. And then we need to decide, is it ethical? Is it worth it to dive deeper into understanding and maybe redefining and making it even better, or should we not? And again, back to Erica's presentation, which was the main reason I emailed her, is because she, I don't know, probably somewhere towards the end, she mentioned that she doesn't have access to trainers like me or you, and that she would be very interested to see and take history from the beginning to the training process and after. And that's kind of what I wanted to offer, because I think there is something to be done there. Hopefully it happens, because again, like if like I give you the Tina story. She was a stray. They caught her, a stray dog, maybe 10 months old, running crazy in Miami, which I have no idea. She must have just got loose, because she would have been killed by a car in the next few minutes. But luckily somebody got her. They put her already on medication there. They were gonna euthanize her. And I saw a video. I'm like, I will take the dog. And I was very, very sincerely wanting to see what an animal veterinary behaviorist will do. What would the approach be? I want to learn it. And I contacted few of the, like in the board of their, the people that write the mission statements and all the protocols. And they refused, because they look at my website, and because I use aversives and I'm a balance trainer. So we have I don't know how they put it, but some conflict of interest, and it will basically not work because of that. So I tried to assure them. I'm like, listen, the reason I'm contacting you, I know who I am, and I was not gonna hide who I am. I actually told you up front. But I'm telling you that I can do step by step anything you want me to do. I want to help the dog, and you believe that you can. So they refused, but they gave me another person to contact locally. So we got in touch. We went to evaluation. They basically said that was a top 5 in a whole career of the veterinarian behaviorist, top 5 of any cases. And she's been in this business since the 80s. So extremely severe case. I mean, you've seen the videos, licking floors and chasing and biting things for hours without, like, you have to stop her. I mean, like an obsessive compulsive disorder in the worst possible way, and there is something to, like, some people understand it, but some people don't know what really means, how crazy this is. And it's like the behavior patterns, they take over the environment, as opposed to the environment driving the thoughts and the behavior patterns. It's like the opposite. So the OCD includes the behaviors, the obsessions, and the compulsion is basically the actions that the dog does, right? So, and they're paired and they work together. So the compulsion relieves, like kind of satisfies the obsession. It's very sick, sad situation. So like, you know, you cannot do that. And so, of course, we put her on SSRI, on Prozac. So immediately we put her on a higher dose because she is a tough case. But it was very difficult for her. And these medicines, they have insanely problematic side effects. And to some people and some dogs, they're very amplified. And so she was one of them. Granted, she was on a higher dosage, but then I know that anybody that has dealt or experienced anything with psychotropic meds is, you know, there is a process of trying to find the right dosage, right? And I was not able from, you know, my kennel to the training building, how much of a distance that you think is. I'm so bad in feet, but what, like 100 feet, 200 feet? It's not that long.
I'm not sure.
Right? But so if I was to bring her out from the kennel to the building, she would lose her mind. And by the time she's in the building, she is just like wasted. So then I asked them, well, so I cannot use aversive, I cannot put her on prong collar, I cannot put her on, you know, I have to somehow bring her in. The suggestion was, well, we offer a toy. She's like, she does not want a toy. She was a dog that would never think about, that was just not in the repertoire.
Yeah.
So that was not a solution. Then the other one was, well, let's teach her Karen Overall's take a deep breath relaxation protocols. I'm like, okay, you have to explain to me what are we doing? And I watched a little video of a dog supposedly taking deep breaths. And I had to ask, well, I don't understand, what are we looking for and what am I supposed to, how do I teach her and how do I reward her? So I dived a little deeper into Karen Overall's protocols. I mean, I was 100% invested to do the prescription they gave me, 100%. And yeah, there was nothing of use. It's basically, what I was supposed to do is I show a food or I capture a deep breath behavior and I give a treat.
She doesn't want treats though, right?
No. And even if she takes a treat with a anger. Like she's just, because it's in, like she cannot avoid it anymore and she has to take it. And it's like, I'm taking this and just fuck you. You know, like that was the
That's
attitude.
Not positive reinforcement then.
Right. So I think it was about 3 weeks and it was not going well.
Right.
Like I was at the point where I cannot watch her anymore of what she's doing.
So you were in the exact same position, right? That when those trainers are looking, saying, we refuse, we won't even engage with you because we won't even be able to stomach watching you even attempting with the dog, right? But I think it's so hard for people to understand that for people like you or people like me, watching the dogs not improve when you know that it is relatively simple to help them improve and to change their state of mind that is in such a bad place. It's as painful for me to watch dogs linger like that any longer than they need to. Fearful dogs, incredible. That's another one for me, is when super, super fearful dogs and nobody wants to put any pressure on them whatsoever. To me, it's so cruel to leave them like that.
Right.
The longer you leave them like that, like who wants to live in a state of fear all the time? So I apologize for interrupting you, but it was very poignant to me that you were saying there, it's painful to watch something that's not working.
And then we you know, like, I mean, now, in the last few years, we like science, actually. I mean, there is new research, there is book, I think, The Rise and Fall of Psychopharmacology. Like, I've read that book a few times, Edward Shorter. I will post it for anybody that is interested. And like, so interesting. And basically, I am in the business of training dogs. I interact with dogs that come to me that have been prescribed psychotropic medications. And in most cases, I think they're so easily prescribed.
It's going nuts in the shelters, Ivan. It's going nuts in the shelters.
And when we're talking about evidence-based, the words that I love to do, I think psychotropic medication is like absolutely without any evidence-based reasons or any approved indications. Like there is nothing to say. And forget about dogs, because with dogs there is even no studies. There is we don't know what the outcomes are without, besides the point of, well, the animal veterinary behavior says that the dog has improved now. But studies with humans, and those studies were kind of put aside for so long, but studies comparing antidepressants to placebo, they found that it's extremely difficult to distinguish between the two. It's not one study. There's like, I can pause those. And we're talking with humans because you can actually, they really did some research. So, and one of them was like, what did they do, like over a period of 8 weeks or so? The ones were meant, the others one or placebo. And they basically found like a very, very small difference, one favoring the medication. But absolutely not clinically significant to the point where every dog that we see that is just a little out of control, a little too happy, a little too shy, a little too aggressive, like pretty much every dog that they get a consultation walks away with a prescription.
And dogs are being medicated again. I'm sorry to get on my rant. Dogs are being medicated in shelters before, probably because they don't get out of their kennels every day. So right. To me, that just is crazy, because they should get out of their kennels every day before you start doing something like that. All the dogs that come to us that are on medications, we wean them off always at first, because we feel like we need the baseline without the medication. We do it properly, and we have a vet that supervises us, right, with that. We wean them off, and a couple of dogs we've decided, okay, we can see that this dog is, despite the fact that we have adequately satiated them, they're having trouble processing. And so when we then see for ourselves, okay, this dog is having trouble processing, despite everything, then we might go back to the medications, find the right dosage while we're doing the behavior modification plan. But we've never sent a dog out on medication. So the whole point is, but I'm definitely disturbed with how much medication is being used for dogs in shelters. Definitely.
Yes, because of that whole, we share the same frustration, and that whole notion of chemical imbalance in the brain. I mean, that was solved for so long from big pharma, and there is really no evidence right now to support that theory. And most of the researchers at this point no longer believe this to be true. Now, even if it is, let's say they work. If your heart is in the right place, wouldn't you be at least curious to see what did I do to have Tina being able to play, not one time since her first month, show any OCD behavior in licking floors, walls, attacking fans, shadows, flies, killing cars, and like having a miserable life, to where she comes out, she plays, she does obedience, she acts like any dog. She behaves better than some of my Malinois. I can put her in the house, I can work on my computer, I have videos, like an amazing change, that it's actually documented. Like, I have filmed every single session since the day she came to the moment where I felt that we have crossed the difficult point. That would be interesting, at least to be presented somewhere to those animal veterinary behaviorists, because if we can do behavior modification, and yes, use some form of aversive, but you don't even know, like, you should be at least interested how much aversive it was used. Because aversive, as we said, dogs play, they use aversives. Like, there is levels, and there is ethical and non-ethical, there is contingent and non-contingent. There is so much to be talked about there. It doesn't fit the narrative. That's what it comes down to. It does not fit the narrative.
So I'm curious, I'd like to know, what did you do for Tina? What changed it for her?
So the one of the very first things was that, and it took me a very long time to redirect the obsessive compulsion to still be obsessive compulsive, but towards something more acceptable, and that was a toy. And to do that, gosh, I mean, I probably spent a month to try to convince her to play. And play is my specialty. Like, this is what the whole training without conflict is about. But I knew that even if I cannot convince her to play as a normal dog, I knew that at least I should be able to redirect the OCD from licking the walls and killing cars, to have that same frustration, the same compulsion, but towards something that I choose. So that was the first step. As I said, I have it's step by step, and I'm not sure what we want to do with this. Like, I was in the beginning posting them every single session to my certified trainers, because but then it became very tasking on me, because I was spending, let's say, 2 hours every day on Tina, and then imagine uploading a 2-hour video and saving that, and then putting it up for a discussion, and it became really tasking, and there is a lot of other projects. So I don't know, we have everything, and one day we probably gonna have a big presentation or make a documentary or something. I don't know. It has to be shown. I know that there's people that have zero interest in it, but I know that the majority of the dog training world would love to see it. And
She definitely, for the level of OCD that she had, to me also ranked high. I mean, we haven't had a dog that has had specific OCD like that at that level. Did have one recently, and he did not make it. We tried and tried and tried and tried, and it was a kind of a version of that. And same thing. We're trying to get him to redirect, and it wasn't like he was OCD like with licking the floor and almost inappropriate behaviors with it. You know, it was almost just looked like as soon as he was out, he was like a normal dog in our, you know, he lived in the office for a while, and he was fine when he was inside, but as soon as he went outside, so it was almost like, was it predatory drive? Was it? But we couldn't quite put our finger on it. But it was, we had him for a long time, and I'm sad, really bummed that we weren't able to turn things around with him. And we were, of course, trying to go to play, but we could not get him to stay focused on any kind of toy, no matter what we tried.
Yeah.
You may have been able to do it, but we were not able to do it.
And sometimes it's also even, I mean, even like the whole kennel environment and the kennel schedule kind of doesn't help. You need to get them totally out of all antecedents. Anything. I mean, she was at the point that we can put her out in a kennel run, and within 2 minutes, I'm talking like the first couple of weeks, you cannot bring her back. You cannot catch her. He has this wide, bulge, mad eyes, and she is attacking unseen things, and she's redirecting, and she's just so sad.
Yeah.
To where I had to change so many things. Ideally, then I mean, I mounted a camera on her kennel run. I had a, you know, and then we went through so much different ideas and options. Yeah, they're definitely those really extreme cases. They take time. They take time in terms of you cannot work with that kind of dog for 15 minutes one day and come back 2 days or 3 days later and do another 15 minutes. There is so much more of the bad type of reinforcement, of that compulsion, and that, you know, that it cannot even come close to trying to fight with it. But again, like I would never say medication doesn't have place.
Me neither.
But
I definitely think there's time.
What I will say is that a lot of times I see it firsthand is that a dog owner will go because it sounds, they feel that they are going to the best of the best. It's an animal veterinary behaviors, and they're like not that many in the country, in the world. Mm-hmm. You make an appointment, you go through some Q&A, they make an evaluation, maybe an hour and a half long, $400, $500 later. Almost every dog walks out with a prescription. We
have not had great success when we have tried to consult with veterinary behaviorists. And before the canine center, when I was in private practice, there's a couple of clients that I had referred to a veterinary behaviorist, and never had success with that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like as I said, like if you have two groups with humans, and you have a placebo and the drug, and within 8 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever the time period was, no significant difference. And those studies never came out because Big Pharma don't want you to come out. And like that book that I mentioned, it's so good because the guy is he's from inside. He is one of the people that developed the whole movement and idea, and finally stepped out of it. Chemical imbalance. It's a very, very sketchy thing and very difficult especially with dogs, and we don't have, there is no one single study. Forget about, like we're just prescribing a medication that is supposed to control chemical imbalance and mostly serotonin levels. And now we know that you don't want to necessarily control serotonin levels because you're controlling all serotonin in your body. And there is no evidence that serotonin even has anything to do with it.
Well, I count on people like you to know all those things because I definitely, getting through all those studies, I don't know how you have the time to do that, all the research that you do about all the research, but thankfully you're doing it, so.
Yeah, I don't even know why I spend so much. I mean, it's interesting to me. I mean, this is why I originally came to you. This is why I had, you know, I mean, anytime you said, I need you to look at a few dogs, I'm like, bring them. I mean, on one side, I want to, we have that relationship now. I cannot, like, of course, if I know that I can help you, I will any day. But in the beginning, it was almost purely kind of just because of my own growth. Like, well, let's see how difficult that dog is. Have I seen that before? Where can we take it? What can I pick? Like it was just for my own evolution, if you want. And the same thing, like with Karen overalls or Aimee. I mean, why would I attend a canine symposium where I know that they will not talk in a good way about certain things that I do? Because, and the same reason you go, because we want to try to have the best opportunity to be better people for those dogs. That's really why we're doing it.
Yeah, and that was exactly the experience. You know, I felt like, and everybody's, you know, kind and professional and everything. It was great though. It was Dr. Carly from Best Friends. She and I have become friends over the years, and she and I. It was very comforting that Dr. Carly was there with me. That I could sit with her, and Dr. I don't know how to pronounce Victoria's last name. Dr. Kusin, anyway, from the ASPCA.
Yeah.
And she's definitely she just was at the Canine Center recently, so it was nice to have her there. But and people were. But listen, I go through the same thing. I'm going into, this sounds hostile territory for me to go up there and to be, but you know, I hate that, and I don't want it to be that way. And because I want to go and learn like everybody else. And so it was all just being brave enough to go and be a part of it. And I learned, in fact, it is right here.
Nice.
Because I have all my notes from it and everything. And I have been intending to write some emails as well, and some thank you emails and everything else, and reaching out to the people that I learned some good stuff from and everything. And then also sharing some feedback, but I haven't gotten around to those emails, and maybe I'll check it out. But I have this here forefront, and there's a ton of things that I brought back and sent to the team. I was firing things off to them like crazy. Let's try this, let's try that, and you know, anything that's going to expand our programming, and so that we can help a dog, because it is the amazing thing about what we do. And just to your point that you just said, there was some curiosity about coming up and seeing what we were doing, and that even in all of your years, and you were in sheltering, and you were working, you know, helping dogs at San Francisco SPCA originally, right? That was your first shelter that you were working with, right? And all the stuff that
this was back in the early 90s. This was when
Gene was there, right?
No, me and Gene overlapped like for probably less than a year. We just couldn't find the common ground.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah. We both have this personality, which, but those were times when fighting rings, I mean, there was like national conventions, there was like West Conference, East Conference, like a baseball league, you know? Like Animal Care, the cops and us will go and bust a ring with with dogs, and then some of the dogs will come in. And now I listen to some of the YouTube dog training influencers, you know, like, oh, I work with pit bulls in shelters, and it's like, in the shelter that you're working, chances are that pit bull has nothing to do with fighting, like with actual pit bulls that are selected, like again, there is levels, you know, and it's the interest that, like, we have the interest to learn their side, and for some reason they don't. But I tell you something, I have conversations, and I'm sure you have conversations. Like, I'm like with a high level knowledgeable people that have a very different facade in front of the world. And when we talk, the conversation is very different. I cannot convince them to come to talk on a podcast. They simply, cannot, because probably they have a position and something well established, and they are at risk. That I mean, look at just a silly podcast that I did with Michael Sicascio, like a ridiculously stupid podcast that we didn't. Nothing was said. Nothing. And
I actually reached out to Michael when I saw that go down, and I know Michael from afar. I haven't known him well. I love it though, because he uses a video, I think, in many of his presentations of my son handling a dog in a top kennel, and Cody's handling was just beautiful. And so he uses that as far as safety and kind of defensive handling. I think Trish McMillan uses it too. And I had reached out to him to say, I saw you wrote a post. I heard that you're on Ivan's podcast. I haven't even listened to it yet, but I'm assuming that that's what that's about. And whatever you're being put through, I'm so sorry. And I think the vitriol is, I guess I also cannot wrap my brain around if there's a community that is fighting for trainers not using aversives. I cannot wrap my brain around the cruelty and the meanness to people in that process. Like, I just don't understand to me, there's such a hypocrisy in that. So then that always leads me to then, because and listen, I can be I can get pretty cranky about stuff and get pretty worked up and pretty reactive about things. And I think, okay, what makes me get that reactive? And what makes me get that emotionally driven about something, especially if I'm supposed to have a clear head and have a level of professionalism or whatever about me. So it always brings me back to that the people that are in that position and that end up being so hateful about it, I think because they honestly feel that they're trying to protect animals from cruelty. I mean, this is what drives them to it. So, but I don't know. I guess it's kind of redundant. We already talked about that, but it's challenging for me to understand it.
But not to be able to talk, not to be able to come and have a conversation and answer question and allowed to be challenged and challenge me back. Like say all the things that you're saying in presentations, bring all the studies that you like have that dialogue. Because I will have something to say. I will have something back to say that's going to challenge you and stimulate you to think a little bit further. And not necessarily point a finger and say, see, I got you. Maybe you have a very legit, solid answer to my questions. But everybody wants to hear it. I think we're done with what science says, because clearly everything that canine science has said so far has not done anything to change the divide.
I just don't even understand.
I tried with the. I mean, I contact Gene Donaldson. I'm like, maybe you would want to come to the podcast, or I talk to on your platform, like just talk about dog training. Mm-hmm. You're a dog trainer, and you mm-hmm. don't like electric collars. You think they're horrible tool. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about it. Maybe you mm-hmm. convince me. Why? What makes you think that you cannot convince me?
I think you said something earlier when I was talking about I've got 18 kennels on either side. You said, well, I don't, and I wanted to ask you about that. You said, I don't think the competitive setup like that is really the answer. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, because I don't know, like I've competed all of my life. Like I'm extremely competitive person, and I guess I understand what competition does. Like you in competition, if you're competitive, you're not just doing it for recreation. If you're competitive, you would do whatever it takes to have the odds in your favor. And I don't think that's what's about. I think it's about, mm-hmm. I think it's about even, like when you said, you use positive reinforcement and you use it just as good as them. I would argue with any single positive trainer that I can at least do it on their level. Mm-hmm. That's how well I understand positive reinforcement. Mm-hmm. And I promise you that I probably will learn something from them about positive reinforcement. And I promise you that they will learn something from me about positive reinforcement that they do not know. They have no idea, simply because they stay in the bubble they have chosen to stay. I watch them how they, I take so much time because it's interesting to me to know and be very, very current on everything. I know the level of positive reinforcement they have, and I know that they can learn something from us. Mm-hmm. And as I said, I know that for sure I will take something from them. So even if we start there, even if we don't bring aversive training at all, and we just collaborate to begin with on positive reinforcement techniques, I think there is a lot to be done. A lot to improve on both sides. Mm-hmm. But even that's a problem.
Right, because I think that even being associated with trainers like us is too risky within that community. And that's what happened to, that's why Michael got pummeled the way that he did.
Yeah, and you know what is really crazy about me and Michael? Like, we had that conversation, and I know quite a bit of what Michael does because I have paid attention to what he does. I don't know if he even knows a little bit of any of my training besides some. I actually don't know because we never really even went there. We just it was a first conversation of what I thought we can have more. But I'm afraid to even hit a like on his Facebook
because of the blowback that he'll experience.
Right.
Yeah, it's
I mean, even like a few weeks ago, Jean Donaldson, and she had a little Facebook Live with few of her graduate students, and they were talking about him without saying his name and how they're still having that reluctance to even attend any event of his or something. Like, it's still a big deal,
It's stunning to me because he's an accomplished trainer, and he does good work, and he delivers information really well. I think I just think that it's a shame. I think that people should be. I actually did a little bit of a rant post of my own recently because, there's a group that seems to want to promote their work by debunking ours. That's just kind of their shtick that they do, and it just gets annoying after a while. And I finally just piped off about it. I'm like, why not stand on your own merits? It also, I guess that's why I get to this competitive place about I'm tired sometimes of defending the work that we're trying to do on behalf of dogs, especially when I know that if you put me in a position, it's like the proof is in the pudding. I know that I can outperform in some circumstances. So I want that to be the thing. It's like, can you stop? Okay, if we go toe to toe together, then will you stop if I actually can, beat you in that competition? And so that's why I thought it was so interesting, you being a competitor, of why. So I guess that's where I'm coming from. And it's maybe not the most sophisticated place for me to come at. I'm just so tired. And to be honest with you, it has a strong impact on our work because it has a lot to do with why or if people will or will not fund us.
I was going there. I was going right there because exactly
it's
right.
It's dead serious for us.
Yes.
And
you have to choose to save lives, help dogs, or be politically correct so you can get the funding. That's a horrible place to be at.
Oh yeah, and you and I have had a couple of conversations in the past where I've had to share with you, like, I'm really reluctant because there's some things, and boy do I hate that. I consider myself a person of integrity. I'm the kind of person I'm not a very shy person. I'm really like wide open, wear my heart on my sleeve, want to be fully transparent about everything. And sometimes I feel like I do have to be considerate of the people that do back our work, because even, this conversation today, I want to make sure when we were talking about it, like, it's time, because the stakes are so high right now. And to be honest with you, I was pretty inspired to come speak with you after going to the Canine Science Symposium. Right. Because there's some things that I learned things, and then there's some things that are troublesome. And I always have, because I'm not an academic, I have to go to the people and bounce things off of them. And I remember once, my point is that I've had to be careful sometimes. You've asked me, do you want to have this conversation? Can you help me with this? And I've had to say, I don't think I can help you with that right now. But to be honest with you, it's almost like being reasonable isn't helping. Like me trying to be just even trying to invite people, and it literally has gotten in the way of funding for us. So it's no joke. So when I have other programs that I give the courtesy of referencing them positively, and I will even refer clients to them, I will do those things because I believe it is the right thing to do in that moment, that I think their program will serve this agency well, and therefore the dogs will benefit, people will benefit, right? So I care about the outcomes for the animals more than anything. But it gets exhausting to then have the little petty posts about debunking everything that we say to lift themselves up. I mean, why don't you lift yourself up on the merits of your own work? The proof is in your own pudding. Stop focusing on mine so much. You'll help more dogs if you just get in there and, do it more. Just go to the shelter and get some dogs out. Just do that. Get away from your freaking computer and your keyboard warrior stuff and get into the shelters.
And if the program is really good and it's working and it's better, ultimately should be a matter of time to where everybody would move out to the better option, right? I mean, that would be logically.
Yes. I'll train to change what I do. I was at the Canine Science Symposium a few years ago. I think it was the last one, because then they didn't have them for the pandemic. And Janice Bradley was there talking about a big brain. And Dr. Merkin was presenting some of the playgroup research that she'd done at that time. And I turned to Janice and I said, do I need to change what I'm doing based upon this research? And she said, not yet. It's not there yet. But, and I love Dr. Merkin. But at any rate, so I said, okay, you tell me when there's research like Ivan, if you came to me and said, Aimee, listen, I found this research about why you need to let your trainers build relationship with individual dogs, and it's now been proven, I'd say, okay, then I give, because here's good research that is demonstrating that this is the way to go. But one of the things that really had bothered me too, and it was around punishment. I think it was Dr. Feuerbacher's. And there was the study, and I'm sure you know of it, about with the smokers. Do you remember that? How human beings, they put basically some kind of a shocking device on human beings to see if they could use punishment to prevent them from smoking, right? And it was kind of flip, but they were just talking about, well, the people just took them off, right? So that clearly didn't, but I think it was presented as if the punishment didn't work. I'm like, well, that's silly. The whole point is, what if they had an ankle bracelet, right? Like that you couldn't take off, right? Would it ultimately work? Would there be a point where punishment could succeed in making people stop smoking cigarettes? So, not that I'm not invested in that one way or another. I'm just saying that it seems silly to me to say that, oh, it didn't work because they would just take the device off. That's not the conclusion that you should come to from that. You know, it's
and
not
that's
about
kind of
how
the like again. I would love to talk to her. I would love to talk to her, even if it's in private. I wish she contacts me, because it's a conversation to be had. Like, it's a good conversation to be had. You know, like pretty much everything that it's you know what I said earlier. It's all about the worst case scenario, and it's all about this non-contingent use of shock. There is no reason to talk about it. Clearly, this is a bad idea. There is no reason to use somebody's money for that. It's clearly a bad idea. Those grants can go into much more sound research. Let's find out how it works, because sometimes it works, and it works better, and sometimes you cannot even tell which dogs have used aversive and which have used only positive reinforcement, but which ones are better without knowing. And then dive into that and find out how. Talking about aggression, like in her presentation, you know, it's one of the favorite places that they like to go to in the, I don't know, it was 60s or 50s, Arzin, and putting two rats in a Skinner box, putting a shock either in their brain or the floor, and they attack each other.
What does that have to, what does any of that have to do with the work that we do today?
Right.
And I, you know, it's funny. It is interesting to me too when, like, when I saw some of even Pavlov's video documentation of his studies with the salivation, I couldn't watch it. I thought, those poor dogs, the condition of the dogs. You know, I'm thinking. So I watched some of those studies thinking, I know we need these things supposedly to have knowledge, and now we won't do it anymore because of the ethics. And it was those poor animals at those times when they were going through all of that, right? I even find that curious that I can't even stand watching some of the videos of this stuff. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't need to see all that to know that I have a dog in front of me that needs my help. And what can I do to help him cope and thrive and become more resilient and more well-balanced and normalized, right?
Right, because if that was the case, imagine, I mean, all, like, the number of electric collars that are out there. Mm-hmm. Imagine the level of aggression and dogs that are just attacking and biting randomly everywhere. I mean, we will not be able to have dogs at that point if that was the case. But on top of that, just for a second, even in that very worst case scenario, there is a further research that was done that shows that even non-contingent provoked induced aggression can be suppressed effectively through punishment forever. Like there is plenty of research for that. She didn't mention that part because it doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't fit the point that she wanted to bring in through the presentation that she had. Now, I agree more than anybody that there is very shitty training going on. But for you not to be able to help a dog because of somebody doing really shitty things to dogs, with or without electric collar, there is no logic to that.
But right, because you could apply it to anything else. Right. Apply it to driving a car.
Right. Yeah.
Some people drive cars very irresponsibly and recklessly, and people get hurt as a result of it.
Yeah.
So why are we still in cars?
Yeah. And the only reason most of us, the 99% of people, drive responsibly is because we're trying to avoid penalties and abide to rules.
Well, I mean,
because
think about
there will be like if you imagine society today and there is no more cops, there is no more consequences to rules, kind of like what goes on in California right now, you know?
We're not going to get into politics, are we? No. Anyway, yeah, no, it'd be so crazy.
But imagine what happens.
Well, how do you even drive down the street?
There will be a chaos. There will be a chaos.
Yes. That's my thing. I said there would be chaos in the universe if we really thought that this bizarre human construct that we've come up with, that was discovered in a laboratory with animals being completely controlled and manipulated, right? And we consider that one of the foundational things. It's just a human construct. That's all it is. And I can't remember who it was, but one of the things that somebody kind of mocked, people like me that will say, I'm more of a naturalist. I'm going to follow the lead of what I see animals and creatures and what happens in nature to me, because that's the real deal, right? Everything that we've created comes from systems that already exist in nature, right? So to me, it's why would I want to construct something that is completely unnatural and does not exist anywhere else other than by human construct? You know what was interesting? It just reminded me again, going back to it was actually the closing on the Canine Symposium. What was Sarah? Mm-hmm. I don't know her name. Yeah, I wouldn't remember. Oh, I'll look at. But she had she had that closing, and it was about wolves and free-range dogs and pets, right? And this big push to keep talking that wolves and dogs are so radically different, and to give the analogy between how apes, how chimps and humans have 99% identical DNA, but we are so different. And to transfer that to wolf and dog difference is so far-fetched. Like there is a very unknown problem of how humans, why we are who we are, why none of the other species on Earth have that level of abstract thinking, function, mathematics, music, and whatever. There is something that we do not know. But what we do know, and it cannot be twisted, wolves and dogs behave very, very similarly to the point that they can, you know, like there is a lot of lessons to be learned. And the only reason they are driving so strongly that push is to avoid the dominance theory. Well, and interestingly, I was just flipping through Reels and I saw this incredible video of gorillas, and there was a mother with a baby on her back, and then another, it must have been an adolescent, I don't know if it was a male or a female, kind of went up to hassle her, and the silverback came from the back, boom, went right over and got him and basically submitted the other one. Oh yeah, right? It was a little punk. I saw that one too. You saw that one too, right? And so I just find that all fascinating. Like that doesn't make me feel like, but again, if we go back to what Dr. Protopopova was saying about what lens do you look at the world through, right? When I think about independence and everything, I think, wow, that was a beautifully delivered correction. Yeah. It was appropriate and good. And, but you know, we don't see much of what happened after that, right? The reel cuts off right away. Right. So it would be curious to see, but I find that so fascinating when I see animals, no matter what species, communicating naturally the way they want to communicate without human interference. And I just think you can't learn I mean, you just learn so much from them if you're just a good observer. And I think coming back to like training dogs in the shelter environment, I think that it's very hard to put all this together. Like, yeah, I think you're getting the gist of where I come from with things, but then I'm looking at, but now I'm enclosing animals in a kennel too. Like I have a kennel too, right? So I'm not into this, oh, let's everybody just be free and do what they want. But there has to be rules and regulations and all this kind of stuff that's how everything functions. You know, everything functions that way. There has to be, again, go back to cars. What we do if we were just all getting in our cars and there were no streets and traffic lights even. There wasn't even all of that. But I think from a training perspective, why would I choose? Okay, with shock collars, I can tell you that there is one technique, we call it the electric leash technique. And it's because we've had a number of dogs that come in where the leash has already been weaponized for them, right? So they have high defense if a person has a hold of a leash. And they're also super high drive typically. So they have strong play drive. They want to tug, they want to do whatever. And they have accomplished and rehearsed basically leash climbing, going after the person. If you dare try to guide them in any way, it's basically game on. This has happened multiple times.
It's become an antecedent for just
right. Exactly. Just the act of having a leash on. So of course, if I say, who was the guest that you had last? She was wonderful. I loved listening to her.
Joe Rossi.
Yeah. So I loved her. And I thought it really fascinating that she's competing and that she's really, really dedicated to remaining without using aversives for her training to a competitive level. I really wish that I could have her come down too and say, okay, in our circumstance where this is dangerous for people to handle. So to me, that's an immediate, this has to be off the table. You grabbing that leash is off the table. And I don't want it to be about me. I don't want you to be upset with me or think I'm upset with you. It has nothing to do with how can I very cleanly provide clarity for you? Putting your mouth on that leash is just off limits. And that is one technique where the dog doesn't necessarily have a lot of other foundation, where we will go to a remote collar because it makes it less personal with us and it makes it just about the leash. And it's like a one and done. And it's for the dogs that we feel like it will be dangerous for us. And because there is so much that's already been front loaded in them, and there is so much experience and reinforcement history to that behavior. And then if it's not dealt with right away, it's ending up redirected onto the handler. And so like, that's an example of where we'll go immediately instead of trying to build, alternative rewardable behaviors or replacement behaviors. That is a whole part of our repertoire most of the time. We're always trying to build all of the foundation. These are the things you can do, because by the time I tell you, you absolutely may not do that anymore. You have all these other choices, right, that are very well reinforced for you. But sometimes they come in and we can't even get to the good stuff because it's so dangerous, right? And I just cannot even describe how
I have to interrupt you and make us like a note to everybody that listens, when you're talking about dangerous dogs and dogs climbing up the leash, like these are dangerous dogs climbing up the leash. This is not your average dog, like some of the dogs that end up at Dogs Play for Life, and they are an extreme examples of difficult dogs that can be turned around. In a lot of cases. Sorry, I had to make sure that it's not because everybody thinks, oh, I've seen that kind of dog. Oh, I've dealt with so many dogs like that. And chances are you have not. And I mean, it is the reason why I use so many of your dogs and stuff even in my course, because of the level of pronounced dangerous behavior sometimes.
Well, I appreciate you acknowledging that. So both you but here's the thing, but I don't want people to have the impression that we want to be lion tamers, and we are also accused of that, right? We also get told, why are you putting this much resource into these problematic dogs and it is true now, our industry, we were basically by the time the Canine Center came around, we really were in the United States, most dogs that were adoptable. Of course, there are some places that perfectly healthy animals were being euthanized, but we were moving really, really farther and farther away from that. unfortunately, right now, I think we're back to it a bit. So I'll have to rethink, maybe maybe we can't help this level right now. Maybe we have to go down to, we're just going to have jumpy mouthies that we have to, because there's going to be too many of those as dogs are being warehoused in shelters, right? And their needs aren't being met, and they're being driven crazy in the shelters. And so that is one of the key components to why we do what we do. It's not because I get off on being a lion tamer and look at how I can work all these most difficult dogs. That's not what it's about. What it's about for us is that, from what I saw over all these years, and I started doing this in 1998, working with shelter dogs exclusively, is that that dog is behaving that way because of what its circumstances are and what is not being provided and who wouldn't behave that way. And so it was, to me, it's a matter of, we don't have the right to call it on them if we had something to do with why they're there. So if once we've done something, for me, like it's as important for us to cull animals that should not be placed as companion animals in our society. I find that responsibility just as important.
Oh yeah.
And I am not a believer in that we can save them all. I think that there are some animals that are not appropriate to be companion animals.
I know.
Right?
We've had those conversations. We've had this, actually, both of us in tears making these decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because, and it is true that maybe there is always a home. And so actually, I don't mean to be disrespectful to those that really want, especially if somebody is willing to provide a sanctuary that will, and I'm not talking about any particular organization, I mean individuals at all. If somebody wants to take an animal home and live in a situation, and as long as not at the expense of others, right? I mean, I understand. It's just that I'm handing this dog. When I was a private trainer, I had many, many clients. I used to be pretty darn good at pretty advanced aggression cases, even when I was just not a shelter trainer, but I was a trainer. And with my pretty high-end clients, and many, many times I would come in and they would say, my dog has bitten this person, this person, and this person. I am not putting my dog down, and I'm hiring you to help me install some training so I have some insurance, like I might have that window to prevent my dog from biting somebody again, and also to teach me proper management. But I will not euthanize my dog. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's fair. If you're willing to take responsibility for this animal's behavior, I will give you my best professional advice for you to prevent this dog from making a mistake that's going to harm another again. I will do my very best, right? There's only one private client that I discontinued working with them because they had a golden retriever that was the kind of resource guarding was weird and very concerning. And I had taken him in as board and train, and they had small children at home. And I said, you know what I'm seeing in this dog, I really do not feel comfortable that this dog is going to be safe in your home environment. And so that was the one where I felt like, I don't feel like I can resolve this for you in your current home situation. I didn't necessarily believe that the dog needed to be euthanized, but I did not believe he was going to be safe with this age children. That's the only time. Yep. Every time else I would accommodate the client. But as soon as I ended up in sheltering full time, it's a whole different ballgame to be the one putting that animal in someone's hands. If an owner already owned the dog, I'm just going to help you because you're now in a bad situation. But I don't want to create that bad situation for you. And so, it is, we do have, we're at like 83 to 84% save rate with the dogs that we work with now. We have never, Janice Bradley asked me once, has any of the dogs that you've placed, like hospitalized someone, have you had any, level 4, level 5, or like hospitalizations? And I said, no. And she said, well, you're already doing better than the average public, dogs out in the public, right? So she expected that we had placed dogs that there had been some terrible incident. And no, that hasn't happened. We also, our returned adoption rate is at, I think it was between 10 to 13%, which is within the normal range of returned adoptions for regular shelters and regular dogs. So to me, what's so important about that is it's not, because I don't want to claim, easy for us to say, oh yeah, we fixed that dog, we had a positive outcome, but then what happens? We know what, we are keeping close contact with the dogs that we put in the community. We also have gone to pick up dogs. We will always stand by our dogs. That's also another thing. I very much do not want to place dangerous animals. I do not. But I also don't want to have I don't want us as the sheltering community or as animal welfare to have driven a dog to this behavior and then say, oh, well, now we're going to cull it because they're not behaving well. I think they really deserve a fair and comprehensive assessment and attempt at intervention.
An attempt at intervention. Beautiful. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's what they deserve. There was something I was going to, so your, the gal that was just on with you, she was wonderful. It was really curious because I would like there was a German Shepherd that we did that electric leash technique. And
by the way,
Chris,
let me interfere. Let me stop you because I wanted to say something about that, and it just went back, and you just got my thought back. You know, like she will not. She will be right along with you. She will not. She will try anything in her repertoire and in her knowledge with all the force-free approach. But when it comes down to can she save the dog, or can she attempt to save a dog by using an aversive, she would have no restriction not to help the dog. And that's something,
right.
that's something very important. Exactly. And this was what Michael Shikashu, which I kind of put him in that place, and he basically said the same thing. There is sometimes a place where this can be the only opportunity to give a chance. And he said that he would. And that's what killed him.
Yeah.
So I admire them, like, yes, do what you do, and hats off. And then if you know, I wouldn't think of them as ideologists, I think of them as trainers. So that's why they would try to help a dog and try to help I mean, these are families. They have a dog, and that dog's going to be put down, just like a kid that has cancer, and everything is off the table, like it's months left. Would you give it a try? Yes, you would. Why wouldn't you? Right? Why wouldn't you?
Well, and also, again, you know, for me, behavior change is so interesting, right? It's so interesting. To your point, what was the speaker's name that I like that you're just referencing? I can't.
Joe Rossi.
Joe Rossi. Okay. So I respected that about her, but also that she wanted to be a purist with her own personal competition dog, right? She was really, really, really trying, and because that's a completely different scenario, right? So when this, remember Chris that came down to you, my team member Chris?
Yes.
Right. So he is our training and behavior manager at the Canine Center now.
He was really he was really good here.
Yeah, he's really good, so talented, and he's a great teacher. And I came into one of the stints, and they had a German Shepherd this is one of the dogs that we did the electric leash technique with. And Chris came to me right away. And Chris is my strongest handler and my strongest trainer. And he said, listen, I just don't know. This dog is making me nervous. I'd like you to, and Chris does not get nervous very easily at all, right? And he's very capable. And the leash climbing on this dog made him that nervous that he wanted to be in a bite suit, right? To actually walk this dog out and everything. So at any rate, that's why we went to this technique. I said, Chris, if you're telling me that, that's it. Let's get this off the table right away. And I would love for Joe Rossi to come. I wish that somebody like that was with, and because if we were missing something, if there was a way for us to redirect him positively to something else, we 100% would have done it. Right. What I think is so interesting is when people can get really creative. That's one of the things that I find, like when she talks about training in her clubs and they're saying, we can fix this for you right now. She's like, let me go back and think. And I want to try to create that scenario because they become masters at managing the environment and access to resources, right? It is so interesting how creative they can become. And I do always think that, and we pride ourselves on doing that too, but I'm like, wow, I would be curious to see if she saw this dog in action, would she say, I think we can create a situation where you could positively reinforce him for either an approximation or for something else. And I'd be fascinated to know that, wow, I didn't even think about that. I mean, I love those moments, but I'd be curious. I'd really be curious. Like there was one dog that we had that went back to his original because we didn't recommend placement for him. And it was the only dog that we'd had. He'd been with us for weeks. We still had, you had to be in a bite suit to and the only thing that we were doing with him is, interestingly, at our center, we can get a dog out of its kennel and out into our big, beautiful free roam yard. It's like 13 acres fenced in, right? And because for me, freedom, independence, is so important for a living being. We want to provide that no matter what, right out of the chute. I want to satiate them first and attend to their needs first before I start kind of compressing and organizing them and expecting things from them. We always go there first. And so at any rate, we can corral dogs out of the kennels. And just so if we can't handle them yet, and most dogs, just to let you know, if we identify that a dog is offensively aggressive to people, in other words, we can't open the kennel and just let them corral themselves out and then take a pack walk with them and just migrate through the field, because they will just come attack us when we're just minding our own business. We don't try to resolve that. It is so rare. It's so rare. It's usually nothing, any of their aggression has usually nothing to do with that, especially with people. So that is something, if we identify that, we're calling it, right? But we can corral these dogs out and they'll get moving with us, and we'll do all these different things with them. And so we can take our time so that we don't have to be so invasive and put them into defense. Right. So we have all these abilities to manipulate these things. But this guy still was sad and he had been heavily medicated and he had been kept at a shelter for a long time. And he had one handler that could handle him. And that person was trying to take him home and then was trying to acclimate him with that person's partner. And I felt very heartfelt, and it was very hard to tell her, we do not believe we can resolve this issue, because it was 2 weeks later or a couple of weeks later, and we still had to be in a bite suit, because if he felt anything, he had to, he had a long line drag, he had to live with the long line dragging for a while. If he felt anything, he would cross, like, to come back at you. It was just so, anyway, these are just kind of the bizarre cases.
No, but this is the kind of call I'm trying to make to all trainers that are interested, no balance, no force free, whatever, all trainers that are interested to collaborate, because we learn from each other. And like, I get stuck not sometime, pretty much on daily basis, watching YouTube videos of influencers on both sides. And so many balanced trainers are that, like, I would say 80% aversive training and maybe 20% of some positive reinforcement, but not like a primitive level positive reinforcement, to where when when I teach at my school lately, I've been emphasizing this to everybody. Force-free people, they're handicapped. Like, imagine left leg and left arm. You don't have them. You don't have negative reinforcement. You don't have positive punishment. In order for you to function, you have no choice. You have to become very good at mastering reinforcement programs.
Yeah, Susan Garrett talked about that a ton with you.
Yeah, she talked a lot. Unfortunately, she didn't want to converse. I had to just let her talk. I was a little bit sad about how that conversation went, because I don't know, she just came with the agenda to say that
convert you. She wanted to convert
she's better. she wanted to say that she's better without ever knowing what I do. Like, not even nothing. But if you like there is a lot to be learned on both sides. That's bottom line. A lot to be learned on both sides. And ultimately, it's a combination. If you are not open to, then you're limited.
That is exactly why I've tried to learn as much as I can from as many different kinds of trainers as possible. When I was at Longmont Humane Society, and it's very interesting when you're a shelter trainer. A lot of times in communities, the trainers that are in the community kind of look down on you, like, oh, you're a shelter trainer because you couldn't make it in the real world, right? So a lot of times trainers would come in and they would want to they would sometimes, in fact, I did this talk at IACP last year about how to create mutually beneficial relationships as a professional trainer with shelters, because a lot of trainers come in kind of to do their demo for the shelters. Literally, usually what they're really looking for is to get referred by the shelters, right? So maybe they'll come in and offer to help a little bit, but they really want to be referred. And I ended up reaching out to trainers all over in the community, all different kinds of trainers, some which I wouldn't want to train the way that they're training, but I learned about them and invited them to the shelter and treated them with professional respect. Many of them would come in and want to just kind of show off to me about how great their techniques are going to work. But it was interesting when I sent them in with problem dogs in the shelter environment, how many of them would say, well, I need time to build relationship. I need time to do this. I'm like, I don't have that time.
Right.
We've got to do it right here, right now, right? We'll get there, but you got to get this dog out of the kennel right here, right now. But what I would do is I would observe them and I learned about their styles, their techniques, their programs. That way, when I had a dog that came up, I thought, this dog I think will really thrive in that trainer's program. And so I had this community of trainers that were willing to help if I called them about a particular dog. And I started to host training Friday nights at my house. And we would all get together and we would pick somebody that would be our coach. And in the beginning, you would see people would kind of be, the same types of trainers would be paired off with one another. And there was some tension because there were some old rivalries. There were some shelters some trainers that were from the same community and competitive with one another so we had, every kind of training. And interestingly, over time, when they started to have some respect for each other, somebody would finally reach out and maybe somebody who used remote collars primarily would ask the clicker trainer, hey, you want to coach me on this session? So it was really interesting, and I loved creating that community, and haven't been able to replicate it since, but I really did love that. And back to like what you were talking about before with the kind of dogs and the lion taming stuff with us, is that funny when it's very reinforcing for us when somebody of your caliber comes in and says, okay, this is the real deal. And J-Jack did that with us too. He, especially with fighting dogs and everything, because that's really his shtick. He, with game bred dogs, he said, everybody tells me that they've got a real, and the same thing came in and said, you've got a kennel full of the 1%ers right here.
Right.
But why does that matter? I mean, why did I bring it back around to that? I think it's about, think about the trainers that I've even had come down to the facility to work with us and everything. It's because we learn something from everybody.
It is the only way forward.
Yeah. I have to admit, though, that I do feel like we are accomplished enough in our programming that I do only invite trainers that have demonstrated results. Like I can see it for myself either. And I have to like watching a person with a dog in hand. Like there's some people that know so much, like they understand training really well. I talk about in my presentations the difference between a master handler and a master trainer. And ideally, you strive to be both. So you have a good clinical understanding, but you also can be magical when a dog is in hand with you. But the problem with that is if you're really just a masterful handler, you can make a dog look damn good, but it doesn't mean that the dog really understands independently these behaviors. Now, you're a competition trainer, so you obviously are an expert at teaching dogs to do a very, very complex task independently, right? But think about average just trainers out there in the world. A lot of them do not have much understanding about how to train something at a complex level like that, or even to get to the underlying. This is what's been so curious for us, is these underlying motivators. Like maybe for you, you're gonna be like, duh, but I've been training for quite some time, and it was about 2 years ago that I thought, we call it sustained eye contact drills. So we have, that's what we call it. Maybe other people have been doing it. Nobody had taught me this before, and it just finally came to me, is that we had all these stranger danger dogs, and we're trying to teach them how to greet people appropriately. And I kept watching my handlers, and I'm thinking, we all intuitively will avert our eyes at the right time if a dog is uncomfortable. But an average person, that's exactly what they do wrong, right? They'll have the big smile, they'll be forward, they'll be staring at the dog, or if they're concerned about the dog, they're going to be just watching the dog like a hawk, right? And so I realized that for so many dogs, that was talk about an antecedent, right? That was a big trigger for a lot of the dogs to not feel comfortable, right? No matter what, whether we had them in if I have the dog holding the sit and my handler approaches the stranger, that was another thing that we decided. Let's make sure that the dog knows you're not responsible for figuring out if this person is friend or foe, right? You just hold your position. I'll go out and I'll, as your handler, demonstrate to you that this person is friendly, right? But then when I realized about the sustained eye contact thing, it was like, oh, we train our dogs to give us eye contact as a default response. If there's anything that's either concerning, exciting, whatever, that they should check in with their handler. We want that as a default, right? And we do a pretty good job at that. But now I told my team, I'm like, I want us to teach the dogs to avert their eyes from people, because people are going to make this mistake. So let's train for that. Let's prepare them for that. And so we had one dog in particular that was a face popper, right? She didn't want to bite you, but she, if you gave her eye, she boom. So we started with her. So we do all, I'm not going to describe the drills because it's too rudimentary here. But it was a matter of just teaching her. And it was funny because we had conditioned eye contact, right? So she was looking at us perfectly happy. But there was a point where she's like, what are you doing? Like, that's so uncool, because we would just stare at her. And then we would start marking her for when she would avert her eyes or break her eye contact. So then we started reinforcing the heck out of that with other people when the dogs, but like, Ivan, how long did that take me to figure that out? How long have I been training dogs? And then finally, 2 years ago, with this particular, I was like, why are we teaching the dogs to avert their eyes when they're uncomfortable, if they don't like the way someone's looking at them? Why don't we teach them that?
Yeah, I mean, there is that, and there is that other version of the opposite one, to where you actually, before the dog even looks at the trigger, you tell them, hey, it's right there. And then you change it back and forth. But yeah, I mean, these are the skills that we need to be sharing. This is why I wish that there has to be a different, almost a different organization.
I know.
That allows everybody to come together.
And in my world, and I'm wondering what you think about this, how much it would pertain to the competition world or just the professional dog training world. I tell my team all the time, the universe is not going to adjust to this dog. The environment is not going to adjust to this dog, right? And that's what we always talk about, also training. This whole concept about blown thresholds, that's another one that makes me go nuts. Because, and I think Jo Rosie did talk about that. She actually reinforced that a little bit too. Like, I'm always talking about, I would not only want to knock on the door of that threshold, but I do want to step over it in the training process, because life is going to blow our thresholds. You're going to walk around a corner when you're out in public, and you might not be ready, but a reactive dog comes around the corner. So it's just as important for the dog to understand how to manage themselves when their threshold is blown. Or teaching these dogs to try to manage themselves or default to something else, even if the handler doesn't support them correctly. Because this is an average person. This is not a professional trainer that this dog is going to go home with. So we want to, first of all, find out what are you going to do? What's your worst case scenario when you're not being supported correctly and when you really can behave the way you want to behave? We've got to discover that. And the interesting thing is, in private training, we very much, we don't want your dog to be allowed to rehearse that. You don't need to show it to me, right? Because every time they're rehearsing it, they're self-rewarding, and but in my world, I 100% want the dog to show me, who are you going to be when all these stars align for you? What is your worst case scenario? Because I need to know what I'm solving for.
Right.
So I don't want to be managing it from the onset. I don't want to create errorless learning. I absolutely do. For me, I think there's a time and a place. Like, okay, if this is a cutesy little thing that I'm not teaching you to go to place and we're in the front lobby and I'm going to free shape that. That's how we train it and everything. Sure, I want to do all that kind of stuff. But when we're coming down to the problem and the actual reason that you're with me, that's all the kind of stuff that's become. These dogs have taught me, even though I had the privilege of working with marine mammals, I had the privilege of training exotics, I had the privilege of training horses. And I think that is also some reason why I'm so open to more comprehensive, is because when you work with multiple species, some that are no contact and that you can't physically manipulate, and some that it's all about physical manipulation, right, like most horse work, right? It's like
I just learned in a podcast, just the one I did, like sea lions, they typically hate to be touched. It actually, you have to work your way to that level. Even though they look very similarly like you're training dogs, but there is definite differences.
And we have dogs that we start out as if we're working with an exotic no contact animal, because they are very well rehearsed in telling you what they do not like, right? And they've had very bad experiences. So we, in the beginning, we still have to be able to work with them, even if we can't touch them. And then we also have to be able to teach them if there's nothing that's positively reinforcing for us to provide for them. That's my big rant about why we embrace. I think in training programs for shelters, there are two things that really make our program stand out. Number one is that while we build relationship, every time we're interacting with animals, we do not rely upon the relationship to be the thing that is progressing them. And number two is we embrace negative reinforcement as much as positive reinforcement to be teaching new behaviors. Because when the dogs tell us that I have nothing to offer you that is positively reinforcing to you, either because I'm frightening to you, right? You don't want food, you don't want touch, you don't want to play, you don't want any of those things, I still have to be able to teach you.
Yeah.
So if I don't know how to use negative reinforcement effectively, I am incredibly handicapped. And most likely the environment will deteriorate that animal further than where they even are starting from, faster than I'll be able to help them, if I'm not willing to embrace elegant negative reinforcement. Yes. But you've taught us so much about the overuse of negative reinforcement and not being able to finish behavior when you stay lingering in that state too long. Oh, we learned all that from you.
We have to, you know what I was thinking, and I will talk to you outside the podcast about this because it's been something we've been talking about lately quite a bit. You know how sometimes you come and you bring dogs for my certifications and stuff, and
I'm coming next week and I have two I want to bring you.
Let's go.
Okay, you let me know. I'll be there.
You know how it works. But I think we're gonna end up doing a little bit even better collaboration to where I'm gonna be offering a different program for my graduates. Like so far we've been doing a lot with the current students always, you know. But I'm thinking to do some a different level of the school to where it's a lot of hands-on, and like they will come here for certain amount of weeks and we will arrange, we have to talk, work out all the logistics of it, but you basically on your end you're gonna have extra hands that are skillful, and they will have the problematic dogs that they can get better as trainers, you know?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you. I keep not finishing my thought that working with dogs in a shelter environment is really what I think has made me a better trainer. Even with all the other animals and species and venues that it was trying to help dogs in adverse conditions and handing them off to somebody else who's not going to know what to do. I think that definitely is the thing that made me a better trainer for sure. And I would love to have your students come up. I think that we could definitely get something going with that. And, I'm really pushing this year because there's always been a high demand for us, for the seminars where we go out and to the shelters and we do the playgroup trainings, and then we do basic like leash handling and
yes, which we actually didn't talk about this. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because I'm sure people will be interested, and that's a very good thing that you're going around and teaching.
Yeah, we provide educational services to shelters. So we travel to shelters and introduce our core enrichment programming. We started to talk about it. That's that Every Dog, Every Day programming that revolves around the implementation of playgroups. And that's the core skill. So shelters call us and say, will you come do a training on how to deal with on-leash reactivity? We will do that after you are implementing playgroups, after your dogs are getting out of their kennels every single day, after we've taught you basically leash handling and kennel routines, like the basic things to teach dogs that make them more mannerly and more appealing to adopters, more pleasant to handle just in your day in and day out. Once you've got that mastered, then I'll help you with the tricky stuff, because of course you're going to have, if you're not doing all that stuff foundationally, of course you're going to have reactive dogs, right? You cannot have that both ways. You can't not be getting the dogs out of the kennels, but say, but I want to fix reactivity. You know, you just can't have that both ways. So that's what we do. We are running around, putting teams on the ground, 2 shelters to install that. And that's thanks to Petco Love, ASPCA, Petco Love Foundation, and the ASPCA. They sponsor those seminars and everything. But then we also have our mentorships, our level 1 mentorships that are at the Jacksonville Humane Society now, where people can come to us for 4 days and learn about playgroup implementation. So they can come to us and learn the same thing, playgroups, leash work, kennel routines. Then we have our level 2 mentorship where people can come to the Canine Center for 4 days. And then we're usually working, you know, they're working our more difficult dogs. And by the way, we have students working our difficult dogs, right? So that, what does that say, right? You got to get somewhere. I've got to have dogs that students can actually handle, right?
Exactly.
They've got to go in the kennels and they've got to be strangers to these dogs and everything. So they come and they learn more about using playgroups as more of a behavior modification tool to work on dogs that are actually struggling with their dog-to-dog interaction, because most of our dogs are definitely more on the selective side at the Canine Center. And then we do specific behavior modification cases. And then the other program that we have is the shadow program, where people can just come and drop in and we just meet you where you are. And you just train dogs with us and we just kind of observe you. You tell us. It's really more catered to that individual person, and they can come for as few or as many days as they want. But to the point that you just talked about, I don't have enough. We've got 28 people on our team now, but we don't have enough people to meet the needs. We've got a long wait list for seminars. We've got a long wait list for dogs coming in. We're trying to get many more students to us. I keep watching this school that you have developed, right? I'm like, wow, look at him go. And we really want to pump out people that can go into the animal sheltering world. We're saying that we want to create the next generation of canine caretakers for shelters, and that DPFL wants to train people. We got to up our game, got to ready to help large dogs that are going to be kept longer in shelters. We want to do that by training people how to be canine enrichment coordinators so they can get on the ground and start from the foundational pieces, install playgroups, and then build from there. And we want to do it through scholarships through the Willen Fund, you know, because of Willen.
Super.
And I know you were so good to Willen. And I want to brag about you for a second, if I may, about how much you have, you know, as one of the best trainers in the world, the amount that you have given to us, how much of your time and expertise that you've shared with us, and that you've been so generous. You let Willen come down to see you right before he passed last year. You've let Chris come in and bring dogs with you. A couple of people went through your school, but you also invited us to send, you know, you've just done so much. And I just want to thank you for that. And, you know, I was actually really curious that when you did ask me to do this with you, I'm curious, like, I thought your audience is not going to be interested in what I have to say, right? Because I just think I'm just like a baby trainer to your audience, right? So what do you think it is that's interesting about what we do, other than because we're not lion tamers?
Yeah, so really what is interesting is that first and foremost, the intention to help dogs and teach people how to help dogs. I mean, I can just stop right there without elaborating further to that, but that's on its own. It's absolutely fantastic thing. Like, hats off to that. And everybody that you have sent, from Waylon and Cody and Chris and everybody, they've been just like sponges, like so willing. So like I'm kind of gonna tear up a little bit because of Waylon.
But that time, Ivan, that you gave Willen, really, he was so inspired from that time. And Willen was one of those people, as a matter of fact, Cody and I talk about it all the time, that Cody's a pretty phenomenal handler. I considered myself to be a pretty good handler. We kept talking about that. Wow, Willen was one of those people, just his handling ability, just his handling with dogs.
No, there was a different role level of talent there, you know? Yeah. Like intuitively.
Well, you made his day when he came down there. He was sometimes he would get a little bit down because he was a very sensitive person. And, you know, he was always hit really hard when the dogs was really struggling. But that time with you was really impactful for him.
I remember, like, the dogs he would bring, like, I'm like, dude, how did you even ride with the dog here? It's like, of course.
Do you remember the time that we had, what was it? Oh, I wanted to tell you that You remember when we were in your parking lot and we were trying to get, it was Zoe. That was Zoe that we were trying to get because she did not want to get back
She
in the
was
car.
done with the crate. Yep.
Yeah.
She was like,
"I'm
I'm
not getting
done
the
with this
She ended up
crate bullshit.
So funny. And that was hysterical. And then the other dog that you came,
But this is
I don't know if you remember.
this is where skills and intuition come above any learned skills that you have, you know, how to act in a moment that you're learning, you're like what you've learned doesn't really help in you anymore, and you just have to do something, and you're going by intuition. And he was one of those guys that that's why we liked each other, because you know that this was very similar to both of us. Like he would trust his intuition, and it wasn't it wasn't misleading him, you know.
No, he's really, really talented. But do you remember when you first, I think it was you came down to just check us out for the first time, and then you came back and you worked with a dog named Kate. And she was the one we were trying to determine. She was very protective of her handler, but she liked people. So you remember her?
Yeah.
Do you remember that bizarre, because you were in the suit. So you actually, you were assessing her. So you were actually, the boogeyman actually showed up. You came in the suit and you were being threatening. And do you remember that bizarre behavior where she came screaming across the yard? She went out, she did, but it was, I've never seen something like that, because she was like terrified. But
yes, it was very extreme. What she really made it all. She made a story in her head, like she was maybe 5 minutes ahead of what was happening, and her story was not going well.
Yeah, right. I just wanted to, I don't know if we've even shared it with you, but that, and she went across the yard to go after you, but like almost like screaming like
she didn't want to, right? Exactly. She was coming and she did not want to. It was yeah.
Now remember, I said earlier, if we identified offensive aggression to people, we would not work with that. But we really, even seeing that, even though she crossed the yard to get to you, I was just like, but she enjoyed meeting people. She just needed to feel like you were safe and everything. I just want to let you know that she's been placed and she's doing beautifully. And
awesome.
There's never been. Yeah, she was.
I would love to see something. I would love to see her. You gotta send me something.
I'll try to find out for you. I'll ask Lauren if she can look that up for you. But I'm thinking, when I asked you the question, like, what is your audience going to want to hear about? I think some of these funky cases might be interesting to them. And Kate was definitely an interesting one. And it took a while for us, but I'm glad that we stood by her. And I fostered her for a while, and she was an amazing dog to live with. And so she was one of those, even though she was wary of strangers or whatever, once she had those routines that she knew, oh, when somebody comes to the door, these are the things, this is the drill that I go through. She really did enjoy people, so it was really nice to have. And
that's what it's about. Where and how, you know, we talk, even whenever we talk, the responsibility that you have, knowing. I mean, it is a different level of responsibility to try to place a dog, and to be successful, because so many people would love to point this one time that, see, they're doing wrong things and it's not good, and instead of looking at the amazing stuff that you're, you know, I don't know, as a dog trainer, a lot of times people think of me as a sport trainer and all this stuff behind me. But you know, that's, I mean, I love doing that. I'm a competitive person, but dogs in general, it's an obsession. It's an obsession, and you know, and that's, I don't think you and I are exceptions. I think there is so many people that want to be this kind of trainers. And what one of the huge barriers for them is this divide, this line in the sand. It's like, you know, it's like, where do I go if I even tell these people that I've been there? This is already gonna blow up. And that's why we cannot move forward, we cannot learn, we cannot get better. We're getting better. Like even, you know how I don't know, Susan Garrett comes to mind when she gave me the story how, and her story is a very, almost a cliche story for a lot of force retrainers. Oh, I have used prong collar, I have used choke chain, I have used electric collar. And now I know I can do better. And what I can tell these people is that what you have done 30 years ago, we are a long ways from there. There is a very different level of how things are done. Are there still people that are stuck in what was happening 30 years ago? Of course there are. But we don't need to pay attention to those people. We need to pay attention to every successful trainer, regardless of where they are and what they believe in. And get together, come together. You know, that's how we get better. That's why it's a, you know, Michael, Chorosi, like you, me. I mean, there is a lot of people that want that, and that's kind of why I keep talking that there has to be, somehow we have to start organizing our own conferences to where we are getting people, because when we have APDT, IACP, and again, I'm not against them. I mean, I'm going to be presenting again this year, and I don't know exactly, I'm bouncing off a couple of very interesting topics for them in my head. Either organization, just because of the image they already have, people from the other side feel uncomfortable, feel unsafe to get there. And we need to find a way, an opportunity to have conferences to where we can meet together regardless of the extreme, like we have to do something. Because there are people, they're the majority of people that train dogs, I know that they want to learn. Even if, and this is what I do with my school, this is, I think, what is different with my school. I teach people, there will be people that are totally force-free trainers, but I can teach them what aversive training, what good aversive training is about. And it's your choice, don't use it, ever. But learn what it is instead of learning from somebody telling you what it was 30 years ago, you know?
Right. I mean, I think that's what's hard for me when I'm presented with some of those older studies, is that also especially when the stuff that's around punishment, because it has nothing to do with what we're even dealing with, or what does that have to do with what we're doing? Right. And so I don't like that, the being paintbrushed, like, or with the broad stroked or whatever. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And I think
you can always pull out somebody on YouTube or Instagram or whatever that's doing stupid training. It's easy on both sides. It's easy. And sure, when you use aversive and you're doing stupid things, it's of course more inappropriate and unethical. But we need to focus on the beauty, the skill, the mastering, to where actually you cannot tell which one is which. And this is where Lima, you know, when you mentioned Lima at one point, and you did.
What is the new thing? What's the new thing they're coming up with now? So Lima's not going to be satisfying enough because people are protesting that Lima was being hijacked by the force-free community, right? As per Dr. Lindsay, right? He's like, no, that's not what it says. What's the new one that they've come up with again? Life? What does that stand for?
That's the thing. There is always the playing with words. As soon as they're
losing an argument, or if something is going a certain way, then just something new pops up to try to get that agenda regardless. That's what's so frustrating to me, especially from academics and scientists.
Right.
I mean, that's where I'm like, but those are the fields that we're supposed to count on for that just core knowledge that would guide work. And so then it's frustrating when you feel like, but it's being presented in a manipulative way for an agenda. And then that's where I really struggle.
And when you talk about Lima, where I was going, like you cannot talk about Lima without taking under strong consideration time. How long does it take?
Right.
Effectiveness. To what degree you are promising a success, and to where you're starting to speculate. Without these two, you cannot talk about Lima, right? And so much we can do, and I'm sure right now there are trainers that are on both sides that would love to join our conversation because they would agree with us. And at the same time, I know, well, I don't even know if the high level, like the few extreme groups will ever, but I don't care about them anymore. Like they like to stay in there. They're absolutely not willing to even discuss, forget about consider anything, even a conversation. They're not willing to, and it's sad.
Well, and also for me, it comes down to like, okay, if you're so opposed to the work that we're doing, then come take some of these dogs, help them. Right. Come take. If you're so afraid that the dogs are being treated so poorly with us, come get them. Right.
That would be a statement. That would definitely be a statement. And this is where, like Daniel Mills with the one Lincoln study about predation and basically how positive reinforcement proved that they can do better than using electric collars to stop dogs from chasing sheep. Right. There's so many questions to ask there. Like if you just say, believe me, it's true. We did a study, but not come to talk about it. Like, how can I? Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. And again, I think we've talked about it. I think we're kind of going round and round about that one particular point. But I think if we talk about the nitty gritty of Dr. Protopopova did, she was very kind. Also everybody, when I was up there, people that knew me well enough knew about losing my son. And so obviously it was like, oh, please don't, because then I'm just going to cry. And then, but at any rate, she was just really sweet because she just reinforced. She said, I think what's so important about the work that you're doing, or or what people need to be considering when they're thinking about the work that you're doing, is the context. And taking things into context.
Right, like, because you're in the right place. Like your heart is in the right place. Like you're not doing this for any other reason. And if somebody can help you to do it better, come forward, help.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome.
I'll never forget with Cooley when he was. I was doing agility with him. We weren't that great. I mean, he got. Anyway, basic titles. But I remember when I was trying to get him to send away from me a little bit, and Waleed was helping me, and he was suggesting, this is what I think, you need to put a little bit more pressure on him, and this is, I can't remember the details of the exercise, but it revolved around putting a little bit more pressure on him. And I, that night I was thinking about it. I thought, Cooley doesn't love agility. It's just a hobby that I have, and he's my dog, and so he kind of does it to, dork around with me. But it wasn't a passion of Cooley's, right? He was doing it for me. And I thought in that context, like, I don't need to put more pressure on him for this, Right. It just, because he doesn't need to do this, right? So it's like, sometimes I feel like saying to people, like, I can be a real softy about certain things, but when I'm talking about a dog that is, if I cannot help you decide to do something else instead of what you're doing right now, you're gonna be dead. And what I hate about the remote collar arguments are when so many people say to us, well, Aimee, again, they won't say this publicly. I've also had plenty of those experiences that very well credentialed people will have reasonable conversations with me privately and offline, but they won't present those positions publicly. And I've been told over and over again, listen, we understand you using aversives or you using remote collars or you using whatever, because we know we have faith in your application and your skill set and your conscientiousness around it, your sensitivity to the dog's experience, all these things. But I'm just, do not believe that this is possible for other people. And then what's crazy to me is most of these people are legitimately educators, right? So this is what I think as educators, we have a responsibility. If you feel like somebody is going to do something poorly, it's our responsibility to teach them how to not do that poorly, right? Rather than saying, well, maybe these 5 people can do this adequately and well and reap the benefits of it, whatever it might be. But these 500 people are going to bungle it, whatever it might be. Therefore, we're not going to allow these 5 can't do it either, right? It just doesn't seem logical to me. I think that as educators, we have a responsibility to teach people how to do it well, rather than say, let's put it away or sweep it under the rug or pretend it doesn't exist or ban it or do whatever. I don't think that makes anything improve, anything. I don't even care what we're talking about, whatever the it might be.
Very true. Very true. That's, for some reason, nobody's paying attention or don't want to pay attention. And I keep saying it almost every time I talk about this topic. Europe is such a good example of how you can put legislations and bans and you're solving nothing. It just makes you feel good at the moment that, okay, we won this battle. And I think it was Nick Bellinger, we had a conversation with him, and it's like, no, I know how many collars are still sold there. I know trainers that use it. I know that when you talk to them, they will tell you different. When I talk to them, they are feeling open to talk about it. It is there, trust me. You have not, the ban is not a solution. It never has been, like never in history anything has been successful like that. And yeah, do we regulate it? Do we not regulate it? I think these are different conversations. I think bottom line is that we have to come together, we have to talk, we have to educate. If you are a force-free trainer and you have spent so much time to master, because not so many have mastered reinforcement, positive reinforcement. Like by no means, like when, just because somebody went to APDT conferences, went to few webinars and wrote down a bunch of secret words to get credits for their continued education, it does not make you a capable hands-on trainer that you understand what you're doing. But the ones that do, they already know, even if they don't want to know, they already know the foundation of how aversive would work, simply because they know how reinforcement works anyway.
That is one of the things that's troubling me about the concept of certification, because I swore that I was never going to certify DPFL handlers. In other words, like you're certified as a, because I thought there is room, once we teach playgroups, let's say, we know that there's room to personalize it and that you will morph it a little bit into something that is going to work for you. So, and we've seen in animal welfare specifically, even when you get inter and intra-tester reliability and lack thereof for like the behavior assessments and all this stuff. I mean, we've learned over and over again, when you try to say, we have trained you in this, and I don't know how, because I know you're certifying your trainers, but your school is very comprehensive, right? It's a whole different ballgame. But I'm curious too, for you over time, like how many students do you feel like, okay, these students are really maintaining with integrity? Like I feel like these students would be a good, solid representation. Like I know I've had plenty of people that have worked for us or that we've trained, and that I feel like that is not what I taught you to do, right?
Yeah.
What concerns me about certification is that the certified trainers that I've met, I don't care what letters you have after your name. And some people can talk an amazing game, like they know their stuff, and then I'll see them with a dog in hand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it is so uninspiring. So the problem that I'm having is certification is not giving me, I love it in concept. I think that having trainers, not have it just be a shingle hanging thing that anybody can do it and take money, which is the way it is right now. I think there should be something that regulates it or at least sets a standard, but I'm just not at all convinced about any of the certifications. I keep saying I'm going to go get certified by the IACP to support that organization, and I keep just not taking the time to do it. But I don't know. What are your, I know you've talked about certification before, but it's concerning to me.
Yeah.
And certified by whom?
So the way I speak for my school. My goal with certification is if somebody certifies, I want to make sure that they understand the concepts of what I teach and what they get certified. Are they gonna ever use that? That's up to them. Mm-hmm. Now, I know there are schools, especially on the force-free side, Ken Ramirez took over, Karen Pryor's and Jane Donaldson Academy and whatever. They actually, you cannot certify unless you convert.
Oh yeah, you have to take a purity pledge.
Right, and I think that's a wrong approach. I think
it's not the American way.
You should be able to go and learn, and if you understand it and you can prove that you understand it and you choose not to, they're two different things to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And with certification, looking in a much bigger picture, like I can tell you from examples from different in Europe, Germans, there is like few countries that have very long tradition of working dogs, or any kind of working dogs, not just German shepherds, but hunting and whatever. And they would have tests like trying to create this ultimate dog. So there will be a certain criteria for breeding. So in German will be like the ZTP and the Kyorong and the Czechs, like all kind of big countries that are into dogs. They have this breeding criteria to develop and maintain certain qualities. And they all start with very good intentions. And then things change. And the way things change with this kind of stuff is when the person that designed it stepped down, and now a new person came in. As the new person comes in, there is a new vision and new construct. And so with certification, like let's say you and I design a certification. Mm-hmm. We're not going to be here forever certifying people. Somebody else going to take over. And right. Whenever that somebody else take over, what's going to be certified, it most likely will be very different. And this is good and bad because you can maintain the vision or you can change it to your liking, not necessarily the ultimate interest to the breed or the training concept or whatever, but to your liking. And this is the dangerous part. And I think something like the Jane Donaldson School is a good example of that. It's like, no, you have to throw the prong collar and electric collar away. And it's the only way that you can move forward.
Right.
And this is my it's a big concern. And I don't think I have a solution or an idea how to go. But one day I'm like, yeah, maybe we should look into certification. And another day I'm like, well, once we start certifying, then the criteria keeps changing. And which way it's going to change, we will not have control anymore.
That's what I'm saying. And certified by whom? Right. So
Exactly.
I
So
had
I
two
think
pieces of
it's much
advice.
easier if we focus on a person, like one thing that we can easily do right now is we look at somebody that is clearly abusing dogs, and it's not even just it actually animal care and police. I mean, it's a some criminal offense at that point. They should not be able to train dogs anymore. Like we can start with something like that. I think we need to focus on individuals than trying to, just like with driving cars, you drink and you hit somebody and that person's dead and you will pay a consequence for that. But I will not pay a consequence because I'm also driving.
Right.
I really think that, yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, so Wendy Bohard, have you met Wendy Bohard?
Yeah,
Oh,
that
she's
was a
amazing.
long
Right?
time
Amazing.
ago.
Yeah. She gave me advice years ago, and she said, don't you dare go get certified now, because once you become part of, it will box you in some way, shape, or form because you've now prescribed this or whatever. She said, and you're already established enough and you're doing your work and your work is measured. So don't do it now. Your train is too far down the tracks. You're better off. You're more free to work the way that you want to work, and you're doing good work. So keep it up. And then I'm trying to remember there's another veterinary behaviorist, I think. God, I cannot remember who it is. This is terrible. Anyway, she said, Aimee, you're going to be taken a lot more seriously if you actually just go and get yourself certified. Like, you are smarter, you're a critical thinker, you're smarter than a lot of you, understand all this stuff, even though you're self-taught in all of it, whatever, you are solid. Just go take the test and get yourself certified, because then you can step into the arena where right now they won't let you in. And you have important stuff that you should be sharing, but you're not going to be taken seriously when you don't have those certifications. And so really polar opposite advice. Right. What would you advise that I do? Certify or don't certify?
Yeah, yeah, it's a tough one. Very, very tough one. Again, like thinking about my school, and again, what I'm certifying is about you're proving that you understand what I'm teaching you. But that's as far as it goes. And if somebody comes to you to train their dog with you, it's your choice. And I hope that you make it clear to the person that comes to you that you're training the way you decide to train. Now, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want you to use as much as possible training without conflict, Ivan's kind of methodology, then I hope that that's what you will do, because they're coming to you knowing that you have certified. But ultimately, it is up to you to choose where you want to go.
Well, I guess the answer then is, like, the truth is we can't control these things, right?
Right.
And, and we always say is like, what's that old saying? It's not the tool, it's the fool, right? So you're talking about people that have the inclination to be abusive, or people that have the inclination to be abusive, right? And I think that that's, no matter what tool they have in hand, like we've all heard those conversations before and everything too. I think that the concept that we are going to be able to control, I mean, I don't think you and I are looking to control anything, but I feel like people are looking to control me, right? Through these processes. And I'm just like, I don't even think, even if I believe in why they want to do that, I don't know why they think that it's actually going to solve a problem. Again, and now I think we're talking in circles again. I think that, and I've heard you have this same conversation with many of your guests, right? So in the end, I think when we're talking about helping dogs, whether you're professionally training or whether you're working in the sheltering world, whether you're competing and an enthusiast, I just have raised my kids, do the best you can every day of your life. Don't benefit at the expense of others. That's the bottom line. Just, why don't we just, you know, that old saying that everything I need to know in life, I learned in kindergarten. Remember those kind of, sometimes I do think we're just all trying to make it too complicated. And when people do bad things, yes, there's people that behave badly shouldn't get what they want. But guess what? Children that behave badly shouldn't get what they want. Dogs that behave badly shouldn't get what they want. You know, I just feel like it's just not that complicated. And I feel like, you know, nice, good, positive civil behavior should be very well reinforced.
Like if we focus on something, I mean, like really certification. How about the people that are clearly not supposed to have dogs? Forget what they're doing with the dog, what colors they're using. It's just unfit person to own a dog because endless reasons for it.
Right.
That's I think a priority to figure it out. But we just like with the legislation with electric colors, it's a
matter of enforcement.
It's a feel good and it's a, oh yeah, let's go after something. How about we try to think about how can we create something where it's like, okay, maybe pass certain tests, like you saw the latest in Texas, the little Dutchie that died in a kennel in Texas few days ago.
I didn't see that. What's that about?
So the guy sends 2 dogs for training, pays $15,000. The dog dies in the kennel. Taken to the vet. He does autopsy. Extreme dehydration. Blisters, like wounds on the feet. Like the dog has been sitting in a concrete under the sun, cooking. This is what we need to focus on. Like there is actual serious issues that we can focus on.
That's so sad. Yeah, I mean, that's what this. Every once in a while, I'll be scrolling, and I get very sensitive. There's certain things that will bog me down.
They shouldn't be able to move now to a different town or different state and open a new business with new name. They should not.
Okay, so this comes down to the enforcement, you know, and when you talk about even in again, just my world is animal sheltering, right? So a lot of communities, animal control agencies are trying to change from a punitive model to an educational model, right? Instead of being the one that's going to show up with a ticket, instead I'm going to show up with your dog that I found wandering and talk to you about licensing and have a conversation with you and educate you about microchipping, or are there resources that we can provide so that the fence is fixed or whatever, right? So a lot of agencies are trying to move to resource provision and support and education than enforcement, right? Like a lot of them are changing their names from animal care and control to animal care centers or resource centers, and so we know, and I do like those trends. Like I do absolutely think of, instead of everything just being, which I guess that's the human version of a compulsion system versus a reward-based system, right? That's even from humans to humans. So I think, but what I would say is exactly the same thing. There's stuff in between. There must be consequences for bad decisions that negatively impact others. Like there has to be. But yes, it's much better if we can inspire that person that might be inclined to doing something that is harmful to another. It would be nice to have intervention and teach them about alternatives for their frustration, for their whatever it might be, right? It's the same thing. But so whenever we come down to, like, even with people, we can't, I don't want it at all to be about, you know, you've made a mistake and now, you're locking you up. We've got to, it's all just complicated. You know, it just comes down to.
It is complicated, super complicated.
Yeah. We are just a fucked up species.
Right.
That's what I think. I think we're the ones that make a mess of everything.
Like, I guess, yeah, it's just sometimes the way today's marketing is, and it's
well, you know what's driving me crazy? You keep using the word influencer. Like I I have a no selfie policy with my company, so that when everybody's out, because it was driving me crazy, where I had staff that were on gigs and everything, and they're doing these selfies about them, and then kind of, you know, I'm like, this is about the work and about the animals. That's what this is about, you know.
Right.
So
that's exactly okay. So that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly it. It's like even you know, even again, like all the YouTube influencers, they're not there to teach and help dogs. It's about me getting likes and getting, which is nothing wrong with that, but if you're not taking it seriously, that sometimes you cannot help, you just don't have the knowledge, or you're stuck, and you there is no one of those people on YouTube, not one, that has ever said, you know what, that's above me. I don't know what to do with that case. You should, it would be wrong for me to give you an advice right now. There is no one time I have seen, and I'm telling you, I watch them because it's entertaining to me. That's a problem.
I do, and I think that, again, I think we're talking about, it's come into our world of training, but that's a bigger societal problem that we're facing right now. And I think that, yeah, I think that's a bigger societal problem. And there's something else I was going to say. We were talking about influencers and the no selfie policy, and
the no selfie policy. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I want my staff to have pictures of them with their dogs, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly.
I wish that because there are some that I've used because they're super cute, and they were done in the spirit of the dog and I together, and it really did look like it was about a moment for the dog. Actually, even my photograph that is my that's on my bio and everything, that was actually me taking a selfie, right? The reason being is I was trying to promote that dog, and it was a great picture because the dog looks like he's looking at me. And so I even used one. So I was such a hypocrite because my main picture that I used was me taking a selfie.
Right.
But you know what I was trying to get at is that I had some of the staff that it was like, you are distracted by your need to create good posts for yourself. You're distracted from the focus of the work. I know what I was going to say is that even with the team, the trainers that I have, lately, one of these phrases that I keep coming up with, and it talked about human psychology and everything, step 2, is that sometimes when they were coaching each other, or they would be talking about the dogs, they would say, well, they just need to build their confidence, right? And I finally started saying, wait a minute, let's think about it this way. How about if you want to feel better, do better? That's why we try to teach essential skills for a life fulfilled. So if you want that person or that dog to boost their confidence, teach them a skill. Don't try to work so hard to make them feel better so that then they can actually, why don't you try flipping that? But that's not the way our world is going.
Not today,
Our
no.
world is telling us, well, us, I'm talking about in America right now, right? Like if we were living,
it's the world. It really is the world.
Right? So everybody, and this is the thing about our species, and I have a hard stop in 12 minutes because I have to pick up my stepson. But I think as a species, human beings right now, we are so freaking self-absorbed. Everything is so focused on my experience, how I feel, my perspective, everything. And I think, gosh, if we could just turn things back out and look at, that's why with my staff, when everybody's like, I'm having a bad day, or I'm feeling emotional, I'm feeling this, I'm like, well, go do something that you can accomplish.
Right.
Go accomplish something. Do an act or learn a skill or do something. And guess what? You'll probably end up feeling better.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I tell you, people sometimes are like, well, they don't even know I'm training pet dogs. Like, they don't know. Because if you have to chase this perfect shot that you have in your head that needs to come out, and you have a dog that's like X number of weeks for you in training, but you're actually not spending time to teach and work with the dog, but you're chasing this interesting video to get likes and clicks.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem where we are.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I agree. And, you know, again, you've met our, you know, you've met our team, and there's been some change since you've been there. So I think every time you come, there's probably a couple of new people. There's some that you've probably seen every single time that you've been there. But I'm telling you, what I think is really impressive about the team is that they are working some gnarly dogs. And these are some young kids, and they are relatively green. And we are somehow managing them and managing to teach them to do something effective that is really causing some behavior change. And so what is that? It's not me, you know. Right. And by the way, what I always tell people is that, and because, you know, especially after losing Willen, that team's been holding it together without me there, like I was there before. But I always tell people, I think I'm a pretty accomplished trainer. I've accomplished some things. This Dogs Playing for Life thing has become pretty cool, but I'm not doing anything new. I have not invented anything. Everything that we pull from, all the good trainers, it's just that we still have, there's these core foundational things, and it just depends upon how you choose to put it together, and then what your mastery is in delivering that to people or to animals. But I mean, I am so sick and tired of people trying to come up with something that makes them relevant. I mean, again, get some good freaking work done. That creates relevance.
That's great relevance. Aimee, I know you gotta go. Tell me, I really want to make sure that people know how they can help Dogs Play for Life. Like any kind of donations. Where I'm gonna put it in the description on the podcast, but I need you to talk a little bit about that, because that's important. You're non-profit. You need the support for sure, and everybody that has listened to you and like what you are and what you are doing, they need to know how they can help.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we could really use some donations and support right now. You can do that through our website. It's Dogs Playing for Life, all spelled out, .com or .org will get you there. And the thing that I'd like to share with your audience that I think will be poignant for your audience in particular is that we do have very generous funders that support the aspect of our programs where we go into the shelters and we teach them how to improve the experience and quality of life for the shelter dogs. And just to my last little thing about that is I've always believed that when you improve quality of life, you're going to get life-saving. And one of the things that's been going wrong in animal sheltering is we've been so focused on saving lives alone that animals have ended up kind of warehoused and their needs aren't met. And then that's where we end up in the driving them crazy thing in the name of sheltering them. But our Canine Center Florida, where I have the privilege of working with you and that you seem to be in support of the work and our efforts there, we have zero funding there, zero support. And you know why that is? Because of everything that we've talked about today.
Yeah.
And because of the resistance to fund something that is not politically correct and force-free and under that umbrella. And I've always maintained our integrity and always told the truth that we are an all tools and techniques program because we want to reach as many dogs as possible. And that, being honest and open about that and transparent about that, is our biggest obstacle and why that critical program has not received the funding that we receive. You know, it seems like such an obvious to people. Yeah, get the dogs out, let them play. It's a real feel good, and it's, you know, people love that. And so we have very generous support there. But all of this, really, the efforts that we've been putting into really becoming sophisticated about helping because it's going to. We've got a long wait list. There is a need. We did a survey of the shelters that we've worked with the enrichment programming, with the seminars and everything. And we asked them, if you had a place to send your behaviorally challenged dogs, would you? And it was over 80% say, yes, there's a need and we would like it. And then it was in combination, I think most of them said, but we don't have the funding for it. And some said that we did, but it was a high percentage. I think it's between 70 to 80% said, yes, we would like a place for that to happen. And I did envision that we should have these regional behavior centers because I was in 2 brick and mortar shelters that were adoption centers trying to help the dogs and seeing as our threshold we were expanding. Like at first we were just saving these and then, well, hey, now we've got that now we're rocking and rolling and that's pretty easy. What's the next level of behavior that we can work with and save? And then it just kept increasing. And there came a point where I felt like I think I could reach a next population of dogs if there was a dedicated space for them to go where we could really meet their needs. And you've seen our facility is beautiful. Then that came along and it got donated, and then we were off and running. But all along, I knew that we were going to that 10 years ago, I knew what was going to happen, that we were going to end up, the dogs that were going to remain in brick and mortar shelters would be larger dogs that were struggling more behaviorally, because all the low-hanging fruit is going to end up being safe pretty soon. So we are going to, I think that as an industry, we need to up our game. So while the core enrichment programming, we will never stop teaching that, and that is so important. The concept of these centers that will be more comprehensive and more sophisticated in their approach, and not handicapping themselves by trying to adhere to one ideology over another, it's going to be really critical if we really want to kind of finish this right, you know, and become like, why in the United States should our animals, our companion animals, be languishing in these tough conditions? Why is that happening in this day and age in this country, right? So we need help. If the canine center is going to stay open, and if we're going to build out more, and if we have opportunities to train more people, we do need support, because that aspect is pretty dry for us.
Well, hopefully that helps some, and you have me at any time with anything I can help, but hopefully anybody that can chip in. It doesn't matter where you are and what you can afford, but help is definitely needed. So please, if you can, that's a place where your money will get to be used for a very good cause. So, Aimee, thank you for coming to the podcast. And as I said,
I can't believe you invited me. It's crazy. Thank you. With the people that you have on this thing, I'm like, how do I get to sit here too?
It's been long overdue, actually. It's been on my mind, and because we always talk, and I'm like, people would like to hear what we talk about, you know. But anyway, in the next few days, we're gonna connect and work some logistics of my plan that I was telling you about. That collaboration.
And since I'm going to be on the ground again, I've got a couple of dogs. If you've got the room to see us, we'd love to pile some people and dogs down. Whatever makes it doable for you. You are always welcome to come to us, but of course we're always willing to come to you if you can give us time.
Yeah, I'm like in the next month or so, I'm totally free. I had these workshops, I had certification weekend. I had a lot going on. In the next couple of days, I'm grading the tests, so but that will be done, and then definitely let's go.
Okay, and then maybe we'll have something really like a really interesting case study that then you can share with everybody again.
Oh, now you really know I cannot say no, right?
Right? Yeah, exactly. Thank you, sir.
All right,
been
Aimee.
an honor.
Beautiful conversation. Thank you.